We're ready. Okay, so we're going to get started. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being at the Wednesday, July 29th, 2020, Montgomery County Council meeting. We're going to begin today with a question that we always ask. Madam Clerk, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yes, good afternoon, Council President and Council members. On the addendum, we have added point 5 at 1:30, the Council sitting as Board of Health, update to COVID-19 and County Public Health Planning. At 2:30, it has been added as a legislative session. There's a new time at 2:30. 1C, introduction of bills, has been added. Bill 3720, subdivision, preliminary plan, adequate public facilities amendments. Lead sponsor is the Council President. At the request of the Planning Board, public hearing is scheduled for 9/15/20 at 7:30 p.m. Added 1D, Bill 3820, taxation, development impact taxes for transportation and public school improvements, amendments. Lead sponsor is the Council President. At the request of the Planning Board, public hearing is scheduled for 9/15/20 at 7:30 p.m. Added 1E, expedited Bill 3920, taxation, recordation tax amendments. Lead sponsor is the Council President. At the request of the Planning Board, public hearing is scheduled for 9/15/20 at 7:30 p.m. Deleted from the agenda is item 5 at 4:15, action, resolution to adopt a proposed amendment to the county charter, property tax limit on taxable value of owner-occupied residential property, limit on tax rate increases. Added, item 7 at 4:50 p.m., District Council session, an announcement, the public hearing for the 2024 subdivision staging policy and related bills is scheduled for 9/15/20 at 7:30 p.m. That is all, Council President.
Thank you very, very much. And we would like to thank Dr. Gales and Dr. Stoddard for being very flexible in their schedule, though we know that you don't have a flexible schedule, so we appreciate that as well. I promise that we're going to try to keep this to no more than an hour for both of you gentlemen, and I'm going to ask my colleagues to keep it to a 5-minute rule for them as well, so that you can get on with your business and we can get on with the rest of ours. And we're going to start with Dr. Gales, please.
Good afternoon, Council President Katz and council members. I will say both Dr. Stoddard and I do have a hard stop at 2:30 as we are meeting with representatives from the independent schools in the area this afternoon to talk about policies related to reopening in their space and an opportunity to hear from them. So I will try to keep my remarks brief and succinct to allow for questions. In terms of updates for you all, there has been an increase. If you paid attention to the state numbers, there's been a steady increase in the numbers across the state, particularly in the Baltimore metropolitan area. Over the pandemic, for many of those weeks, the National Capital Region attributed over 50% of the cases on a daily basis. That has changed, and now the National Capital Region accounts for 30 to 35% of cases on a daily basis, and the remainder are coming particularly from BMA and other areas, for example, the Ocean City area in the Eastern Shore part of the state. Of particular note, there has been an increase in the number of young people, particularly 20 to 29 and 10 to 19. And there have been demonstrated outbreaks of cases related to restaurants and bars, as well as a number of sporting events, including youth sports. I believe there was a lacrosse tournament where there was a number of cases associated with that, et cetera. Now, on a local level, our numbers, as we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, have plateaued in that 70 to 80 range, with the slightest uptick over the last 21 days when we stretch it out over a 3-week period. We've not seen a commensurate uptick in our cases as have in other areas, and not a huge increase in the utilization of our healthcare system. However, we are alarmed because, as we said, the numbers are increasing at the state level. and we have noticed an increase in cases in the District of Columbia as well as in parts of Virginia. In fact, the governor of Virginia enacted or rolled back provisions for, I think, the Hampton Roads, Norfolk area yesterday from phase 3 to phase 2. Now, I set that stage to say that we are looking at strategies and ideas and reevaluating where we stand in terms of what we have reopened, and in terms of potential things that we may need to curb or change to prevent us from seeing an uptick in cases similar to what's being seen across the state and across the country, and certainly potentially adopting a more aggressive strategy in terms of bringing us down and breaking us from the plateau. So we have had conversations with our colleagues throughout the National Capital Region to discuss what, if any, actions we need to take as a jurisdiction as well as a region to implement strategies to do just what I mentioned. So we are thinking about those strategies, everything from, potentially looking at hours of services that we have available, how we would implement potentially a travel restriction strategy. And I know that there have been a host of folks sending emails regarding extending our reopening strategy, whether it relates to swimming pools or capacity of events. We're not in a place to do that, honestly, right now. And I think most of our conversations are looking at, as opposed to moving forward and adding provisions to that, it's what do we potentially need to keep in place or adjust to make sure our numbers don't go in other directions. Now, we will continue to look at if there are unique niche opportunities to provide waivers for events, but as far as any changes to our global countywide policies, we are not making or recommending any adjustments to those policies at the moment. Now, I want to also, I will share it with you all because I'm not as tech savvy using the Zoom platform, but we did provide an updated evaluation of numbers that I had shown you all before, breaking down the test volume as well as the test positivity by race and ethnicity. And we do have updated information. The previous information that I shared with you all only looked at or only shared the July numbers for the Latino community and showed significant improvements in test positivity. Those gained hold, and also the trends that we noticed were improvements of test positivity for other racial and ethnic categories, both overall in the county as well as by those top 10 zip codes. It's important to note also that the trends that were identified then showing that overall the Latino community had more tests run in comparison to others, continues to hold through July as well. And so I will share that document with you all offline. But suffice to say, the numbers have improved, and when we look at things, for example, we're seeing an overall test positivity for the Latino community in July of 2.5 compared to 1.3 for non-Hispanic Asian, 2.5 for non-Hispanic Black, and 1.3 for non-Hispanic White. We have continued to expand our testing provisions. We have cleared and are going to be training approximately, the goal is ultimately over 250, but the first wave of county employees who will assist us in supporting the standing up of our current test sites to 5 days a week. And they were cleared late yesterday, and we will begin training them this week and early next week to do just that. So please stay tuned on the dates when those will go live. Additionally, the state has made an announcement, at least to the nursing homes, that, as you know, they have been covering the testing for those sites for the last several months, and from my understanding, plan to do so until mid-August. As you may recall from some of our previous conversations, we have been working with the nursing homes and assisted living facilities to discuss to be able to provide additional testing to those facilities. And in some cases, we've already provided testing to assisted living facilities, and we are continuing those partnerships and conversations to be able to support that once the state options and support goes away. We do have a number of new test sites that are coming online. We have engaged a number of churches, and those church sites, these are part of our online scheduling platform, will be going live on weekends to provide testing during weekend hours. Additionally, Silver Spring will start tomorrow doing a standing Thursday testing event for the next month. And we also prioritize setting up a site this week in the 20906 zip code, again, to get those percentages up in comparison to the other high volume zip codes. And that testing will be at the Mid-County Rec Center on Friday morning and early afternoon. A couple things I want to highlight. Also, the ready responders have gone live. They've tested over 70 individuals, over 40 different families, and that continues to grow as folks get more familiar with that resource. The CDC team that was here, their deployment has ended, created a fantastic report, both qualitative and quantitative, providing insights in terms of our response in areas where we can improve, and to talk about the efficacy of the response so far in terms of breaking down the demographic and surveillance data. Once I have that report in hand, we'll be glad to share that with you all to provide more insights in terms of our next steps and also reviewing what we've done so far. The last thing I want to highlight is the contact tracing piece. And again, there's an individual on your staff, Naeem, I believe, who is serving as the point coordinator, who we provided all of this documentation to, and I assume they will be working to share that information with you all. Additionally, a lot of this information that was requested is a part of an internal dashboard that will work to make sure that you all have access to. I think the county staff are taking care of that. And so the point in terms of contact tracing, just to give you updates from the week of the 14th through the 20th, the median time between first contact and successful interview was 45 hours and 26 hours median time for a contact interview. Now, for those cases that we were able to reach within 48 hours on a first call attempt, that was 97% of those. 78% were able to successfully complete an interview. 100% of them named contacts, and 93% of those contacts were a first call attempt was successful within 48 hours of them entering into the COVID link system. And so we continue to work with the state. As a reminder, this is through the COVID link state system to try to tease out more information to be able to guide our steps as a locality, but also provide more information to you all as Board of Health. I will stop there in the interest of time. I don't know if Dr. Stoddard will go next, but happy to answer questions at any point.
Thank you. I am going to ask Dr. Stoddard to go next because he too has to lead the same as you do. So, Dr. Stoddard, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I do want to add one comment, and I heard this on the news yesterday. So for context, in Miami-Dade County, the 48-hour checkpoint is 18% for contact tracing, to give you a comparison of where we are relative to another hotspot in the country. You don't need to be a mathematician to understand how terribly different that is and how problematic that is. Couple points. I do want to give a quick update on the fire that occurred in Silver Spring on Monday evening, about 7 o'clock. It was on Carroll Avenue. There were 12 families displaced, and by our total count, it was roughly 60 people who were displaced by that event. I want to give an update on the services that we offered them yesterday and continue to offer them today, because I think they highlight exactly what we're dealing with during COVID and also how we're working to address the issue. So as of yesterday, we had talked to 10 of the 12 families. Those two we were working to reach out to. To those families, we offered them COVID-19 testing via the ready responders from noon until 7:30 yesterday. We did an intensive health screening of all the adults and children. We had initial human services screening for all of the families that we could reach out to. The crisis center was on site to provide mental health support. And there was one couple who was showing some symptoms consistent with COVID-19 that we did transport to the quarantine hotel and are providing them with more long-term and intensive support. We had 6 staff members from DHS who were Spanish speakers on site working with those families. And Red Cross is continuing to provide them with meal support to their rooms, as well as snacks in between. We have engaged, there was actually a meeting today, probably still ongoing right now, with the Long Branch partners, the nonprofit community in the area. These are all lessons learned after the Arlo Street explosion that we, really modified our process to really make sure that we're integrating with the nonprofit community and making sure we provide more holistic social service support system to those impacted. And so obviously I just want to say thank you to HHS, Emergency Management, the Test Center, Latino Health Initiative, Public Health, the Ready Responders, Red Cross, and the Mass Care team for all that work. For other more COVID-19 specific updates, I want to provide a PPE update because I know Councilmember Reamer asked a question this morning about PPE. We did have a, so I don't want to call it a pause so much as we had given out like a 4 to 8 week supply of resources to many of our assisted living facilities and nursing homes, so we were not doing them for a couple weeks. We began again on this week to continue to provide additional supplies. They actually should be good into August. I think we have a 4 week supply on July the 12th, and so they should have resources, but we are restarting resource deliveries this week anyway. That was a planned ability to have us, catch up with our warehousing and things like that. So they are rolling back out this week, and that was, started on Monday again. We had a community recovery advisory group meeting yesterday, which is obviously as a reminder, 50 representatives of our diverse community across Montgomery County, with representation from, all of our demographic groups, our faith community, our nonprofits across the county. They provide us great feedback. While the goal was to apply a racial equity and inclusion lens to the work that we've been doing, particularly as it relates to the eviction prevention appropriation that you all approved yesterday, talking about the process for how we're going to market and advertise to our diverse communities in Montgomery County, how we're going to ensure that the distribution of those resources is focused on our most vulnerable populations. How do we ensure that people are aware of the resources, and how do we make sure that the resources get into the hands of people the most? And so we got a lot of tremendous feedback. Actually, we're going to hopefully have a meeting today to discuss that feedback and how we're going to actually utilize that feedback to modify our strategy moving forward. Board of Educations, we've had several conversations with the Board of Educations in preparation for the election in November. Their concern is we are right now we're concerned we're only going to have about 1/3 of the election judges that we would have in a normal election year of this size. That's obviously a huge challenge, and there are also the other challenges associated with how do we make polling locations safe? How do we, where do we need to install plexiglass, PPE, all of those things as well. And so there's a lot to do to plan on that side. I just wanted to provide that we are working with them very closely on that. Department of General Services has already reached out to the Board of Elections to make sure that, we're providing them with the resources that they need, identifying what those resources are, et cetera. I'll have more to update on that as that continues to work. We talked about the staffing surge. As of this morning, we had provided 120 additional staff from county government to HHS to integrate into the testing mechanism. That is not including the 25 or so that we've identified for expanding the call taking, and so that is provided as well. We're continuing to recruit additional, and where necessary, we will become more prescriptive in how we do that. But I just wanted to give that update to say that we have acquired the vast number of volunteers from across county government to address the testing sites, and that will continue to ramp up as we move forward. And then finally, I want to touch on the enforcement and education piece. We are adding additional inspectors from other agencies, DHCA, DPS, and others. I know you all saw the press release where we are going to do some more enforcement on construction sites. We know that those are particularly vulnerable residents who, for whom we have seen issues across the county about face covering and distancing requirements on construction sites. They've been deemed an essential activity from the beginning by the governor. That does not in any way relieve them of the responsibility of protecting the public and their staff particularly. And so we're going to do some more enforcement in that arena to ensure that those workers are protected. One thing I do want to touch on is this issue of live performances. This has become an increasingly area of focus. Couple things on live performances. First off, we had some real conversations about what about live performances was actually not permitted by the state. So, because this is a state order, not a local one in this case. The issue around live performances is it focuses on the audience, and so it may seem simple to say what an audience may make sense to us, but we've gotten questions about, for example, if you're at a restaurant and someone starts playing a saxophone tangential to you being at that restaurant, are you an audience at that point? You didn't come to the place to listen to the the saxophonist, for example, but it's background music. And so there has been some questions on, interpretation of exactly what defines a live audience and what does not. If you had, for example, a DJ playing in the background of a food distribution event, is that a live performance? And so obviously there's some pretty clear sides where yes, that's a performance, no, that's not. But there's a whole lot of in between where there's some interpretation that's had to go on legally. I would also add, and this is important to understand, even as we ramp up the number of inspectors and people out there, we will never be able to be in all places at all times. And so we are still responding to hundreds of complaints that are filed every week through Health and Human Services 311 and other means, and we are responding to them as quickly as we possibly can. But at this point, we're not in a position to be at every location, every restaurant, every activity that's happening in the public. And so, where we're not aware of certain things, I'm quite confident there have been live performances and will continue to be live performances that we aren't aware of. When complaints come in or when things are brought to us, we certainly have to enforce the state regulation as well as our local ordinances, and we will continue to do that. But obviously, part of my saying this here is to have it be clear that live performances, those with an audience, are clear violations of the state orders, and as such, when we become aware of them, we absolutely have to make those businesses aware that those are not permitted. Again, that's we're enforcing the state code there, not to say that we're agreeing or disagreeing with it, but where there are challenges, that's certainly what we're enforcing. So, I'll stop there.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn to my colleagues, but just so I'm clear, Dr. Gales, you said on the swimming issue, for the lap lanes specifically, you're saying at this point that you're not changing anything? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying at this point we're not changing anything?
No, we're not changing any of the guidelines. Again, I know that I've received hundreds of letters from families. I think you all have been CC'd on those related to specific pools. I think folks have to understand is, again, that the policies that we put into place are for the entire county and not just for one particular group. And so when putting those policies in place, we have to take into consideration everyone. I know that there are some competitive teams. Again, we can take a look and see if there's opportunities for waivers for specific activities. But the policy that we have in place is actually consistent with our peer jurisdictions, such as Prince George's and Baltimore City, and in fact is more open than DC. DC doesn't allow swimming, period, and those types of pools. So at this point, particularly given where we stand in terms of conversations about increasing numbers, we're not recommending any large or any change to the county policy overall.
All right, and to the point that you said about waivers, if someone was looking for a waiver, they would send it to you? How does that work?
So we've received some input from some of the spaces, and what I'll say is this: we'll have our licensing and regulatory team take a look at it. Again, if it's safe, and again, the larger question is, much like we talked about the conversation with schools, is there's lots of great, for example, MCPS, I'm not picking on them, they put together great policies. Like, they've got great plans in terms of how to keep kids safe when they get there. We just are not at a point from a community standpoint where we have the numbers at a lower place that we would feel safe that even with those provisions in place that we would minimize and mitigate transmission. So we'll take a look. It's not a guarantee to say that it will happen, but our team will take a look at it. I think we do have at least one group has sent a proposal in, and the L&R team is taking a look at it.
Okay.
I want to add one quick point to this. Sorry, we've seen several proposals using the rationale of this is what they allow in other parts of the state or other parts of the country. That, generally speaking, is not a compelling argument for the safety of said activity, given that many of those other locations have exploding case numbers. And so I'm not sure that, if you could make the argument of something being safe or not on its merits, that's a totally different story. But utilizing the rationale of what they allow in other states and other counties where their numbers are exploding is, to be clear, is not a compelling argument for us.
Okay. And can you give us any, thank you. And can you give us any update on where we are with Leisure World's testing?
Sure. So the team actually did a site visit with, we had our exchange. They did a site visit with them. If today is Wednesday, I believe that was Monday afternoon. It was Monday afternoon or yesterday morning to move forward with that. So that is in the works. We're able to connect. And I think the question is just in terms of who will administer the test. But the site visit has been completed. I think the loop has been closed, and that should hopefully be rolled out within the next week at the latest.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm doing the 5-minute rule, and I live by the 5-minute rule too. And want all my colleagues to know that. I wrote down the time for me too. And the first person to speak is Councilmember Ream.
Thank you. Good report. I think a lot has happened over the last few weeks. I was just so happy to see the 250, FTE program rolling out, and really staffing up all of the centers. It's good news. I'm not going to ask for a response on this, but I am getting a lot of inquiries now about turnaround time on testing, and I know that, there's a lot of issues, and people don't know necessarily whether the tests that they have taken, what might be factors that would make it one that would turn around faster or turn around slower. But I'll just say, anything you can do to ensure a rapid turnaround of test results, 48 hours or less, I think would be very much appreciated in the community. I know you know better than all of us why that is important. Actually, let me ask, is there anything we can do or that, that can be done to ensure the most rapid turnaround? And then I do have another question, so please, if you can keep your response as brief as possible.
Sure, I'll be very brief and easy. So we actually don't control the turnaround time with the labs. It's a process issue. The private labs are experiencing delays. I think that has been corrected over the last week based upon the way the results I'm seeing in the system, how quickly they're being reported. So this is simply it's based on capacity, and they're getting slammed. I mean, we're seeing record cases in these other jurisdictions. As it relates to the local laboratory, we have been working with them to update their software and make sure that has been corrected. From my understanding, that has improved for the overwhelming majority, but there continue to be folks who there are some delays in getting them. And I would say 99.9% of those, actually I would say all of those are negative results. And so we just got to continue to stay on top of that and improve, because we share your concern about getting it out quickly.
Okay, thank you. All right. The health regulation that the council enacted as Board of Health, one of the provisions was to ask you to take the plan that you did give to us, and thank you, because it was an impressive document, as Councilmember Albornoz has said. We wanted to go further and have a written strategy around schools and employers. I can just read the text. It says, the executive must submit a full and detailed COVID-19 response plan, including testing and contact tracing strategy for schools, employers, employees in various sectors, and vulnerable communities to the council by July 28th. It must detail the relationship between testing, tracing, and isolating. I know you weren't able to provide it yesterday. When can we expect that kind of next iteration that's going to go further and a little deeper than the last plan?
Sure. Well, one of the documents we've actually provided to you back in June related to contact tracing and the strategy related to that. So we could go back and take that report and update it with the testing strategy, but that you do have some documentation that gives insights to that. And also part of that is the school system is fluid right now, obviously, as we're trying to work with them and work with the independent schools. So I think some of the information you have already, we're actively trying to address these issues around. So testing is important for the schools. We're trying to work through the strategy now in terms of how they're going to reopen. And as it relates to the businesses, we do have a good amount of those working relationships laid in terms of reaching out with those large venues. So if you can give us some time to put it, take that and translate it onto paper, that'd be great. I'm sorry that wasn't available yesterday, but we can get that to you within the next week.
Understood, and you're right. The school situation has changed since probably 3 weeks ago. But with employers, I think the question is: are there sectors like the restaurant sector, for example, where we could have a targeted strategy with restaurant employers, to help them understand how to get their employees tested, when we think they ought to have them tested, and get the information into their employees' hands about what testing opportunities, just as an example, to kind of take some of those frontline sectors and develop partnerships with the sectors themselves. I did mention that to the MCEDC, and they would be willing to work on that with us as well. Okay, so we'll get a next version of the plan that you've given us, and it'll cover some of the additional areas. One of the keys is the. Am I done, Sydney? Are we done? Okay.
You're done. You're done.
Thank you.
We'll find out a key. You'll keep us hanging for the key for next time. Councilmember Rice, please.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk fast. So Dr. Gales, when it comes to schools, and I appreciate you meeting with the independent schools, both you and Dr. Stoddard, because that's really important because we're hearing so much in chatter around inconsistencies amongst what private schools are saying they're going to be doing in the fall and what our public schools are doing. And so folks are wondering how in the world that's possible if folks are held to the same standard. So I really appreciate that moving forward. So that's not even my question. That's just a thank you. When it comes to, however, us looking at schools reopening, and I've had this question from parents as well as teachers, will something encompass a robust testing model similar to what we have in terms of we require now vaccinations for our children before they come back to school? But are we even doing a baseline in terms of, or has that been a conversation? I'm just curious because that's what folks are asking me. Has there been a baseline in terms of conversation around robust testing, not only for employees, but also for students?
So I'll talk really quickly too and try to get this done so we have more time. So Councilmember Raymer, yes, we will get that report to you. And I don't know what the key is, but we'll anticipate and try to answer it. Councilmember Rice, as part of the strategy related to the schools, those are all being discussed because I think everybody is trying to figure out what's the best practice and how to do this. These are not easy decisions. And for folks watching at home, no one wants to close them. No one wants to rush to reopen them. We're just trying to base, when we look, there's anecdotal evidence. I think there was a private school actually in Houston, who opened last Monday. And by Friday, there were 5 COVID cases amongst kids and staff, and who knows how many else after doing investigation. So we're trying to balance this and do it safely. We want kids to have the most advantageous educational opportunities, but we want to make sure they are in an environment where they do it safely. So I can attest to you that all of the things that you mentioned have been discussed on a local level as well as a state level. I can't speak for the federal level, but we are trying to figure out what's the best mix of those to be able to do it safely.
Thank you very much. And I yield my time, Mr. President.
Thank you. It pays to be an auctioneer. I'm just telling you. Councilmember Joando, please.
25, 35. Okay, there we go. Right, yeah. Thank you very much. The Councilmember Rice is certainly the best auctioneer on the county council. I'm sure about that. Couple questions. Really glad to see the numbers. And Dr. Gales, if I'm correct, you said you would send us the updated report on the test positivity in the next very soon, right?
I'll try to take care of it after this, before the other call, to make sure I don't forget it.
Great. And I know Councilmember Rice and I, following the great work of Councilmember Navarro and Oliver and I are meeting with the African American Health Program, I think tomorrow, or so, to talk further about the what we need to do to ensure that some of the issues I raised last week around we get more tests out in the Black community in general. And you said that I'm happy to hear that the Latino community, they are getting access to testing at least at equal rates of the white community and others. That is not the case in the Black community. Has that trend continued into this next set of data?
So the testing volume, I wouldn't necessarily match it directly to access. I would just say the test run. There's a lot of factors within that. And to that, that's one of when we actually had a conversation with reps from AHP, and one of the zip codes that they expressed concern about was 20906, which is why we quickly went, to stand up an option there, and have been working to promote that through their different networks and communication. But the testing volume does hold true from our last conversation where those numbers stood.
Okay. All right. So that's obviously something we'll be talking about more with you and with them. And on the this is maybe for Dr. Stoddard. I've been receiving some reports, and this is not new. We've seen this with noise complaints and other things in the past pre-COVID, that certain businesses are getting targeted more for activity that others are doing. I know the truth is probably somewhere in the middle on that. Could you talk to me and send a report of, I don't know where this is available, of who is getting cited and where you're going and how all that's happening, because I'm getting more concerns from business owners and from residents on both sides of the issue, wanting people to be there to be enforcement, but also saying that they think that there's disparate enforcement. So could you address that?
So certainly we can provide data about where we've gone and who we've talked to, and who's been doing things well and where we've had to issue citations. But obviously, at this point, everything that we are doing is complaint driven. So let me rephrase that because that's not actually accurate. So as far as education, we're educating pretty broadly across the county. We're doing outreach to say, here are the rules, here are the things. When it comes to enforcement, which is where we've heard about a complaint or are looking for complaints, but we've heard a complaint, we go out and we respond and we inspect and we find what we find. And so I have to look. I mean, we obviously have where complaints coming in, and we can provide that information too. And so obviously, in the targeting of businesses, as it were, obviously places where there is a density of more businesses in an area that have had complaints, we're naturally going to go to hit a number of businesses when we go out instead of going out to this one and this one over here. And so I would certainly think that there is a trend that the areas that have a greater density of businesses are likely to see more enforcement because there's a greater density of complaints in one area, and we're going to be responding to it. We've been very concerned about the equity issues from the beginning, though, because I think obviously we could talk about this certainly more. I did not think it was appropriate that we be targeting, Silver Spring disproportionately relative to Gaithersburg or to Poolsville. And so we've been very conscious of that from the beginning and incorporating that in. But obviously,
right. If you get a call,
go, right?
You got to go. And I don't expect you, and I don't think the public expects you to self-correct for bias that's in our society when people call, but we do need to be aware of it and try and look at the numbers and make sure that we're, it's not overrepresented, and we do what we can, and maybe it's more of an education activity as opposed to enforcement activity in some of those cases. So I know you're doing that, but I think seeing the numbers would be helpful, and I appreciate that context. Thank you for all that you all are doing. I'll look for the reports, and I'm glad we're heading in the right direction in the midst of a sea of not heading in the right direction in other places. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys are meeting with the independent schools this afternoon. One of the tools that they are utilizing, and a number of businesses are as well, to justify moving forward with plans to reopen is taking people's temperature every morning and having that as a safety protocol. Certainly has value, but isn't it true, Dr. Gales, that people who are asymptomatic may not actually have a fever, but may have the virus? And so while it's one of many steps we need to take, it's probably not the panacea that on some level some people are making it out to be. Is that correct?
That is very correct. And actually part of what we're hoping to accomplish in hearing from the different schools in terms of what types of strategies that they are discussing, exploring, putting into place. Our goal is to listen and get feedback, but yeah, you're right. So temperature checks is not the end-all be-all, because in fact we know that there are a percentage, and in fact we've seen even in some of our different organizations and entities where individuals where temperature checks have been in place, they've been asymptomatic, they've cleared, but they have been discovered to be positive and have in fact put others at risk because they were afebrile and asymptomatic but still had the virus.
And the other issue is, of course, the schools can do everything they can to control the school environment, but they have no control over what happens when those kids go home. and whether or not
That's
their
correct.
families are adhering to the guidelines and policies. So that's why it complicates things. And it's a tough situation because obviously independent schools are in a better position than most because they already have smaller classroom sizes. And understandably, there's an anxiousness and a concern that we all have to balance the social and emotional impacts of students, but recognizing those logistical challenges. And so I would love to hear back from you what the report out is of your conversations with those independent schools. If you could please email us later tonight or tomorrow what the outcome was with recommendations, what next steps are, that would be great. And what hasn't been clear, I know we've asked, but is what authority do we have? Do we have the authority? You as public health, us as Board of Health, or is it the governor's call in making the decision? That I think is obviously relevant here too. So that would be helpful. Final thing for me is, and so appreciate Dr. Gales. I know we're making progress in a lot of areas. I think the statistic that triggered the concern a few weeks ago within the Latino community, which you shared with us because you were concerned about what it showed, was that although the overall numbers are going down and the average number of cases have dropped to, then it was almost 50. I think it's up a little bit higher now per day. It was the percentage of those people testing positive, even within that 50 or 60, that seemed to be so disproportionately high. And so if you could please continue to include that chart, acknowledging Councilmember Jawando's point about the level of testing, it's still a very important data point and should be included in the charts that you're going to be sharing with us across the board. And final thing is, appreciate the comment with regards to aquatics. A lot of frustration in the sports community over confusion over why soccer is in phase 3 instead of phase 2. And so I think there's probably some more that we need to do in that space. And I know you've already done a lot, but there's a referral on the sports link to the state, and sometimes the language and the semantics are different, saying the same thing but in a different way, and that's confusing people. So I do think that that's something that we're going to need to think about moving forward in terms of clarifying that language that I think would be helpful to a number of different organizations. But with that, I'll yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Drs. Gale and Stoddard. I was going through my inbox during the start of this conversation, seeing what I've received a voluminous amount of correspondence on, and pools was definitely top of that list, and so I appreciate you starting the conversation with that. And then also a lot of social media talk with concerns about the testing turnaround, and appreciate that being asked earlier. And so there's just two other issues I have a question about. Things that I have, concerns I've received, particularly from the LGBTQ plus community with regard to the testing, and when individuals are going to sign up for being tested, there are binary choices for gender expression. And here in the state of Maryland, we have driver's licenses that have a third unspecified other option. And they're asking if that third option that's on the driver's license can also be listed for the testing. Do either of you or Dr. Gales, do you have any thoughts on how we remedy this?
So we did bring that up with the laboratory, because the platform that you're speaking about is on the laboratory side. It's not the county side. And so we're asking and trying to work with them to correct it, because it's a part of their software. Because we do everything you said, endorse and support 150%. And so we are actively working to try to figure out if it's possible to change it on their end, recognizing everything that you mentioned.
Okay, I appreciate that. Good to know that that we on the council or we on the county are doing everything that we can. Mm-hmm. It's just the private sector partnership that doesn't have that software. Okay, and then the only other question I have is last week, I think it was last week, Dr. Gales, you and your colleagues from some of the major Maryland jurisdictions wrote to the governor and asked the governor to revise some of the activities listed under the phase 2. I'm curious what response you and your colleagues have received. You're smiling there.
So I do want to just clarify, the communication that we sent was actually to Deputy Secretary Phillips to convey that to the governor in their conversations. And so the response, we enjoy a great working relationship with Deputy Secretary Phillips and the staff at MDH. I know that those concerns have been shared with the governor's office. I think as best as I can share with you in terms of the response, I think is evident by what the governor has stated or not stated in the last week or so since we put that information up. My understanding is that he has a press conference this afternoon that he may be addressing the increase in numbers across the state. We remain committed from the public health sector, from the health officers, that we recognize that there are differences within jurisdictions, that, there may be some tweaks and nuances, but there are some overall strategies that could be adopted at the state level. When we were thinking, we actually were having a conversation related to travel restriction, talking about other jurisdictions. But when you look at the state of Maryland, there are some hot spots that are concerning. For example, Ocean City, where I believe it is suggested and recommended that you wear a face covering, but it's not required. And so I think there are some steps that could be taken on a state level with state leadership to address that would be beneficial and helpful to us as local communities, recognizing that people move back and forth across the boundaries and borders.
Well, go ahead, Dr. Stoddard.
I would like to add to this. I think both Dr. Gales and I smiled because both of us on the call earlier today expressed some more colorful language to describe our displeasure with what's going on at both the national and state level. National leadership matters, state leadership matters, and I know it's not a popular thing to recognize when things aren't going as well as you would like them to, but and we've talked about what restrictions we can put in place in Montgomery County. But we're not an island, and so our ability to limit what happens when our residents visit neighboring jurisdictions to our own, or certainly Ocean City and other places, is limited. And having seen, I actually was over the weekend visiting family on the Delaware shore, and following all the rules. We didn't go anywhere, but just driving, you can see just the total lack of compliance around distancing and enforcement all along the Delaware shore and elsewhere. So, I mean, this is a huge problem. We need the governor to step up and take leadership. I mean, as Dr. Yells already said, we're talking about it, what we can do at a county level, but we can't do all that we think is necessary.
National leadership matters and state leadership matters. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you. Vice President Hucker.
Funny, Councilmember Glass repeated that. I was just going to repeat that as well. That is a pithier version of what I often say. So thank you, Dr. Stoddard. I might steal that without attribution. Dr. Gales, thank you for all your work, and looking forward to getting their updated numbers as well. Dr. Stoddard, several points. One is I totally agree we should not be driven by what's allowed in other states, and I'm glad that is your North Star and has been since the beginning, and I think all of us support not wavering from that. Two, thanks a lot to you and your staff and Dr. Crowell and his HHS staff and the Red Cross and the Test Center for the response to the fire on Carroll Avenue. I haven't talked to you all. I've been in touch with Dr. Crowell. I've shared an update about it, but I really feel like your response was thoughtful, was thorough, and it was multi-layered, and it was thoughtful and thorough, and I really appreciate that. And I'm really glad to hear about the enhanced enforcement on the construction sites. We've heard many complaints for a long time. Seemed like a gap that was needed to be addressed. I do hope you'll keep in touch with us about who are the owners of those construction sites, because many of them are either county sites or county contractors or utilities that we deal with quite a bit. And if they're not complying immediately to your directives, we would want to know that. And obviously it dovetails with the enhanced effort to protect our Latino residents that was spearheaded by council members Navarro and Albornoz. So I think it's a really welcome initiative, and I'm eager to hear how that goes. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Council Member Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you so much, Dr. Stoddard and Dr. Gales. Really appreciate everything you're doing. I think that I'm very pleased with the direction that we are taking regarding addressing those disparities in our Latino community, in our Black community. I'm very excited about this model, and I really look forward to seeing how it's going to be implemented. I think it's one that we could definitely keep going because it really is comprehensive. So I've heard a lot of the micro issues, which is what we are elected to track. And I wanted to take a step back for a second and just get your reaction, generally speaking, on, where we're headed. In March, I remember us having conversations about, hey, maybe in June, we'll be ready to do X, Y, and Z, thinking that this virus would kind of, get through its life and it would be we'll be ready in the summer to do certain things. Right now, as we track national news, we see the hot spots, just describing how even within our state, we have particular hot spots, trying to convince everybody not to have restriction fatigue and that there's a reason for that. But have you had any time in your busy, your busy schedules to just kind of take a step back and think through where exactly are we headed here? Some tech companies have told, I know my daughter, for example, they've already said, hey, you're going to be working, remotely until next year. Both my daughters, et cetera. And so I feel like there is, we're so busy working on the micro level, but I wonder if you have had any time to reflect on perhaps what's at stake, where are we headed, because this has an impact on our financial, situation, our economy, but also it's kind of a sobering message for those who starting to feel a bit of, restriction fatigue, et cetera, that, look, we got to stick with this, we got to stick with this. Any thoughts that you can express on that?
You're right. It's a sobering reality, and it is a sobering frustration because we had hoped that we would turn this around. And so many jurisdictions had turned this around to, if you think back to 3 weeks ago, the tone of our conversation was, well, when are we going to get to phase 3? Are we at 14 days? We're counting down. And no one's talking about that now. Because I think the reality is that we have a large amount of work to be done. For the folks who are at home with restriction fatigue, you got to hang in there. Because if you let up, we're going to become one of those 20 to 25 hot spots that are seeing significant increases. We've already seen an uptick. I don't want us to become the exponential curve and compare it to that. So I think the reality is we're going to be at this for a lot longer. I think we're going to, the provisions that we put into place, face coverings, things like that, teleworking and promoting those policies is going to become our baseline for the foreseeable future. And that is also in the setting of, some potential advances, not potential, but upcoming advances from a biomedical perspective in terms of vaccines and other treatments. So not all hope is lost. It's just we've got to tough this, stay the course. And, in Montgomery County, we've been able to see the improvements because residents have adhered to it. We've got higher adherence in terms of face coverings, folks sticking close to home and not going out. And we've just got to continue to do that. So, because even in the setting of these increases in other parts of the state, we have plateaued. And so you're right. We're talking about a shift of maybe 10 cases on average to where other places are seeing their numbers double in the same time setting. So we got to just continue. It's not over. And there's going to be lots of frustration because we had hoped to be in a different place. But unfortunately, we're not there, and we can't let up now.
I would only add that I appreciate the question very much. I mean, we've received a lot of questions about why we're doing a recovery framework while we're responding to the event. And I think it's really to your point, which is that there's going to be a period where this evolves into something else. There's going to be an after period, and we have to be thinking long term about what that means for our community and how we start to lay the groundwork for how we are better after this is over with. And there's a lot of work groups that we're not talking a whole lot about because it's not the thing that's right in front of our face. But when we talk about service access and other issues like that, those are long-term issues that we need to make sure are better today, but better 6 months from now. And so certainly I think that's, I think we're there loud and clear. Obviously, I think we all wish we had more time to do strategic thinking. I think everyone wishes that, but it is something we think about with some regularity. We don't talk about it as much because obviously it's not the thing that's most current, but it's certainly something that we've built into our systems to allow us to do.
Thank you. And the last speaker today, and it's at 2:28:52, so we're almost under the mark, is Councilmember Friedson.
I'm going to try my best to be under the 2:30 mark, or at least
Wow.
close to it. So I'm going to come in way under budget. But most of my questions have already been asked. I really appreciate Councilmember Navarro's question. I was going to ask a global type question of that, so I won't repeat it. But I did also want to note, as has kind of been the theme here, we spend a lot of time in these briefings expressing frustration because people in the community are suffering. And the suffering has not been felt equally or equitably, and all of us share in that frustration. I don't think any of us hold it to ourselves, and it's come out, and that's our job. And I think that the public has a right to see us having these uncomfortable and critical conversations. It hasn't always been perfect, and I haven't always agreed with the decisions, or sometimes haven't even understood the decisions, but we are in a better place than most. And we have gotten to a place where we are targeting solutions to targeted communities that require that type of effort. We need to do more, and there's more to do. But I just wanted to thank you. I mean, I think, we are where we are in terms of where the state is and where we were before. We are where we are in terms of where the country is in so many places. It's thanks to your leadership, Dr. Gales and Dr. Stoddard largely. And we've tried to push and to ask and to poke and to try to drive us to a direction that actually addresses the issues. But, I do think that it doesn't often go said. Usually it's what isn't happening, not what is happening. And what is happening, while still hugely challenging and at times tragic, is better than most. And I didn't want to miss the opportunity to say that. We still have work to do, a lot of it, but I think we're at the place now where we can actually do that work together. It feels like we're pulling in the same direction. I think some of the fruits of your labor are being seen in terms of the tough decisions that you've had to make. We'll continue to ask the tough questions and continue to work with you, but I did just want to appreciate the work that you're doing and look forward to continuing the work that we need to do to get our community back to a place where it can be safe and doing activities as much as possible.
Thank you. Well said. And Councilmember Albornoz did point out that we should consider, and let me say we will, if this happens, leave open a calling of a special session of the Board of Health in case an emergency arises. So we, anymore, even if someone is away from their home, they can Zoom in. So we are here. We are your partner. We are appreciative. And we also know that you have other places to Zoom to. So thank you very much, and thank you for all that you're doing. Thanks. All right. With that, and we were pretty close. It's 2:32 according to my clock, so we're pretty good.
That's perfect.
There you go. It's rare we hear that, by the way. Thanks.
Okay.
The next item that we have is the legislative session day 23. And we have some introduction of bills. The first bill is Bill 3520, Human Rights and Civil Liberties, Fair Criminal Recording Screening Standards, Amendments. The lead sponsor is Councilmember Giwando. The public hearing is scheduled for September 15th, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. The next bill...
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a brief comment.
Please.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to explain this bill. And I appreciate the opportunity to briefly state this. We have a ban the box law in Montgomery County that was passed by a former council member, sponsored by former council member Sheree Branson. And this law updates that law and strengthens it in some significant ways. It kind of comes and I'll just briefly explain them. One, about 85% of our businesses are less than 15 people in Montgomery County. The way the law is currently constructed, it only applies to businesses that are larger than 15 people. So 85% of our businesses are not covered under the current ban the box law. This also pushes when you can ask the question about a prior arrest or conviction to after a conditional offer has been made. And it also eliminates certain offenses that are misdemeanors or that have been expunged, in certain low-level offenses from being asked about at all at any time during the process. And this really comes from, my work on this issue, but a meeting I had at the jail when I did in Clarksburg, when I did a meeting as part of my library tour with some residents of the jail in Clarksburg, which were talking about how they just have had so much trouble re-entering society and getting a job and having a fair shake. And it's, we talk about this a lot, that once you get back in, you should be able to get housing, get a job, get back on your feet. At no time in our history is that more important than right now, coming out of COVID. So I would hope that colleagues will co-sponsor. I think it's common sense updating of the law to ensure that all of our residents can contribute to society after they paid their debt to society. And I want to thank former Councilmember Branson for her leadership on this in previous years, and it's my opportunity now and honor to hopefully update this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. The next bill that we'll be introducing is an expedited bill 3620, Forest Conservation Amendments. The lead sponsor is the Council President at the request of the Planning Board. Public hearing is scheduled for 9/22/20 at 1:30 in the afternoon. The next bill, 3720, Subdivision Preliminary Plan Adequate Public Facilities Amendments. The lead sponsor is the Council President at the request of the Planning Board. Public hearing is scheduled for 9/15/20 at 7:30 p.m. The next bill is Bill 3820, Taxation Development Impact Taxes for Transportation and Public School Improvements Amendments. Lead sponsor is the Council President at the request of the Planning Board. Public hearing is scheduled for 9/15/2020 at 7:30 p.m. And the last bill is Expedited Bill 3920, Taxation Recordation Tax Amendments. The lead sponsor is Council President at the request of the Planning Board. Public hearing is scheduled for 9/15/20 at 7:30 p.m. And next, we have calls for bills of final reading. The first one is Bill 2420, Administration, Police, Assistant Chiefs of Police. The Public Safety Committee recommends enactment with amendments, and I'm going to ask Ms. Myhill to please explain it, please.
Good afternoon, council members. The bill that you have before you, as the council president said, is Bill 2420, which would create another assistant chief of police position. Later today, you will also take action on the executive regulations that this FAROG helps staff. The Public Safety Committee recommendation was to enact the bill with an amendment to make it expedited.
Okay. Any comments on that? No? It is a Public Safety Committee recommendation. It is a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes. So it carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item that we will be discussing is Expedited Bill 30-20, Administration, Executive Branch, Chief Digital Officer. The Government Operation Committee recommends enactment with amendments. And Councilmember Navarro, did you want to give us some information about that, please?
Yes, I would. Thank you so much. So, as you know, the executive had proposed a chief digital officer position, and this particular bill comes as a result of some further examination and deliberation, specifically with the new director of our Department of Technology Services, who believes that it would be best for this position to be contained within the Department of Technology Services, as there is a move to realign and rethink these kinds of new direction for that particular department. Ms. Roper has done a lot of work in examining how to best fit this particular position, and she has a particular vision for it that she described to our committee. Basically, the committee voted 3-0 to recommend enactment of the bill, and as I said earlier, it would transfer that position from the Office of the County Executive to the Department of Technology Services. This position will be a non-merit position, and it will report directly to the Director of DTS. And as I said earlier, it does bring, in my opinion, forth a lot of a different direction to address issues of competency as well as longstanding technology requirements to update systems that are public-facing and to establish methods for human-centered design and find flexible, practical solutions to problems faster. The primary duties of the Chief Digital Officer is to lead the development of the digital business strategy and roadmap for the county, define and report on digital business key performance indicators and metrics that represent progress against digital goals. One of the issues that we also discussed during the GO committee was the role of this position vis-a-vis also facilitating areas in economic development as the county is working so hard to push forward and facilitate particular collaboration with the private sector. This is pretty much how it was envisioned in the beginning, and Ms. Roper has shared with us that that definitely will still happen. And she, quite frankly, felt that there were a lot of things that needed to be updated in a different direction, needed to be taken. And so the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee members, President Katz and Councilmember Friedson, and I felt that this would be a good move. And so we recommend enactment as a 3-0 recommendation.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer, did you want to comment on this?
Oh, thank you. That was a different, I was signaling I wanted to talk on one of the bills that we introduced earlier, but it's not a big deal. And
Okay. Very good. Sorry I missed it, and we miscommunicated the whole time there. Thank you very much, Councilmember Navarro. I don't see, let me just see if I see any other speakers on this.
Council President Katz?
Yes.
Can I speak for a moment? Very sorry to interject, but I just wanted to clarify before your vote that there's also an accompanying regulation with the position description. So I don't know if you want to have a separate vote or just encapsulate that in your vote on this bill.
If we could probably do everything together. Was that part of the GO recommendation?
Not specifically. The GO recommendation was to approve the bill with amendments. The position description, has been in each of the various packets related to this matter. So, it has been part of the public record, and it was, published in the Register. So it's simply the position description, some updates to the position description for the CDO position.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, do you have an opinion on this?
I think per our staff, Ms. Welland's recommendation, I think that we can adopt both the bill as amended as well as the regulation that accompanies the job description.
Thank you. And with that, I understand it is the roll call vote. So, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Dewando?
Yes.
Mr. Dewando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friesen?
Yes.
Mr. Friesen votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes, so that carries unanimously as well. Thank you very much. The next item that we have is Bill 2520, Rental Assistance Amendments, and it's an HHS committee recommends enactment with amendments. And with that, we're going to call on the HHS chair, Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Yes, this bill was introduced at the request of the county executive. It expands the rental assistance program eligibility, specifically clarifying the definition of a person with a documented disability, removing the prohibition of eligibility of county residents without immigration documentation, and to provide that the benefit amount for the program is established in regulations. We very much appreciate the executive's efforts in this space. We completely agreed with this bill and its expansion. We did propose some amendments to clarify that the policy parameters of the rental assistance program, including program eligibility, would be set by Method 2 regulation, while the specific benefit amount would be determined by Method 3 regulation. But those were our only two amendments, and we recommend enactment of this bill with those amendments.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Glaze.
Thank you, Mr. President. The HHS chair, Mr. Albornoz, did a great job of explaining the bill, and I would just like to add one other element that, back in April, as we were starting our efforts to face this pandemic and make sure that residents could afford to stay in their homes and that nobody became homeless, when we introduced the $2 million first tranche of rental assistance, we sent a letter collectively signed to the executive asking for some of those requirements to be updated to meet the needs of today. And the executive sent over these regulations, accepting a number of those recommendations to make it easier for us to provide rental assistance. And essentially that's what this comes down to, making sure that we can provide rental assistance for individuals in our community, regardless of their nation of origin or their immigration status, so that nobody will be homeless during this pandemic and hopefully thereafter. So thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Myhill, did you have anything else to add? Ms. Myhill, are you there? No? Well, we're going to take silence as nothing else to add, so. Yeah, no? Okay. Well, this was a HHS committee recommendation. And with that, I understand, Madam Clerk, this is a roll call vote.
Yes. Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friesen?
Yes.
Mr. Friesen votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes, and that carries unanimously as well. Thank you very much. And the next item that we have is Bill 2720, Police Regulations Use of Force Policy. This is a continuation of the conversation that we had last week. The Public Safety Committee did recommend enactment with amendments. And Ms. Wellens, we've gone through much of this, but we still have a couple of items that we need to discuss further. So if you would please lead us through that.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. President. So as you mentioned, the council discussed this bill in depth at the meeting on July 21st and discussed the Public Safety Committee's recommended amendments to the bill. As you said, that the committee recommended adopting the bill with several amendments. The two issues that were discussed initially last week on the 21st, but that the council did not fully resolve, one relates to the definition of a term, and then the other relates to the use of no-knock warrants and entering private premises without first knocking and announcing by police officers. So with respect to the first issue, the defining terms, as you'll recall, the bill as originally drafted prohibits officers from striking a restrained individual. And the issue was the definition of restrained individual. The Public Safety Committee had suggested defining restrained individual as an individual who is under control, is not resisting arrest, and no longer poses a threat to the officer or others in the immediate area. There was some discussion of possibly revising that definition to instead, and this was, I believe, Councilmember Joando's suggestion, to define, to revise that definition so that it would read: restrained individual means an individual who is under control and is not actively resisting arrest by use of intentional force that threatens serious bodily injury. So the issue before the full council is, which of those amendments, or if there's a variation on those amendments, that you would be interested in adopting.
Okay. Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to briefly explain this. We started down this path last time. The goal here, as Ms. Wellens has mentioned in her packet, which is, again, very well done. Thank you, Ms. Wellens. I know this has been a moving target, is to not allow striking of a restrained individual if there's passive resistance, is I think the term. In the, someone's like, I don't want to be arrested. I didn't do anything wrong. Maybe turning a shoulder, moving away, but they're not actively causing harm or seeking to cause harm or serious bodily injury, as defined in the definition to an officer, which is obviously possible if they are restrained. But I think this strikes the right balance of preventing what we don't want to happen, but also leaving enough wiggle room in case an officer is in danger or the public is in danger by someone who is restrained. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Chief, do you have a comment on that? I know the chief is, yes. Chief, do you have a comment on this as well?
Nope, I have no comment on this one. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So, Ms. Wellens, could you explain that one more time, please, what we are voting on this one?
Do we need a motion, Mr. Council President, or do we?
Well, we probably do in a moment. Well,
and I can move it as well.
Yeah, but let her explain it one more time, please.
Okay, so the definition as moved by Councilmember Joando would provide as follows: that a restrained individual means an individual who is under control and is not actively resisting arrest by use of intentional force that threatens serious bodily injury. And it appears on page 2 of the staff memorandum for today.
Okay. All right. Is any other comment on this, or is there a motion? Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the packet. Thank you for the amendment from Councilmember Joando. I guess I'm still confused. I totally agree with the intention here and everything that Councilmember Joando is saying, that turning your shoulders or avoiding or saying you don't want to be arrested is not something that we want for somebody to be like as a rationale for striking a restrained individual. I mean, that is everybody's goal here. I'm still not understanding how the original language from the Public Safety Committee doesn't satisfy that. That's where I'm just not quite understanding. I mean, threatening serious bodily injury seems to be a pretty, different from turning your shoulders away. And it seemed to me that the original public safety language, maybe Ms. Wellens can explain what was missing in that language that legally wouldn't have covered turning away from an arrest, because it seemed to me when I read that original, no longer poses a threat to the officer or others in the immediate area, which I believe was the original language. And it would seem to me that if you're turning away, you're not posing a threat to anybody in the immediate area. So you could just explain that's what I'm trying to understand.
So I think, Councilmember Friedson, that the idea of the Second Amendment, I think that you're correct about the person no longer posing a threat. I think that the Councilmember Jawando's amendment makes the point a little more precise, that posing a threat might be more open to interpretation than using intentional force that threatens serious bodily injury. And then I think what's probably missing from the first one is just the concept of the actively resisting arrest, as opposed to, I'm just going to lie down on the pavement and not cooperate. But I mean, you do raise the point that, most likely that person wouldn't be posing a threat. So they are similar. I think that the intent of the second one is to be a little more precise and to really drive home the idea that passive resistance would not justify the striking of the individual.
And I can respond if you want, just brief. That is
sure.
That is the point. The subjectivity of the determination of resisting arrest versus no longer posing a threat. That it was trying to put a finer point on it, that you can resist arrest without posing threat of serious bodily injury. And I think Ms. Wellens stated it right, but I think the point was to put a fine point on the resisting, to define that even more clearly as active resistance that can cause harm versus some other type of resistance that wouldn't cause harm. So that was the point. And I think the subjectivity of no longer poses a threat, that's open to more wide level of interpretation in my view.
Got it. So I guess my only follow-up, again, I appreciate and totally agree with the goal here. I guess, to be serious bodily injury. So if somebody's restrained, they lunge at, make a physical, intentional physical act looking to, be aggressive, and an officer, pushes them to the ground or does something based on that, would that qualify as a serious bodily? I'm just trying to understand, we're talking about, to me, very different things. On the one hand, somebody avoiding, laying on the ground saying they don't want to be arrested, not allowing their hands to be handcuffed, different than a physical act that's intentional and that could be violent, versus serious bodily injury, which I'm not sure. To me, that seems like a higher bar, and I'm not sure what the interpretation of the serious bodily injury would be in this context.
Well, I would think in that context, and we're having a discussion, but I would think in that context, a police officer needs to bring that person under control. If someone is keeping their hands, if their hands are underneath their body, they don't know what else they have underneath their body, and they could have a weapon or whatever. So they need to put that person in restraints. But once that person is in restraints, then I think is when Councilmember Jawando's point is that they are no longer a threat. If they are no longer a threat, they could still be kicking or whatever. But if they're no longer a threat, then that's when this part of the motion would be enacted. They'd be under that part of the motion. Am I saying that correctly as far as you're concerned, Councilmember Jawando?
Yes, and I think also Councilman Friedson brought up the point of the definition of striking, which we also define in the bill of forcibly hitting forcibly and deliberately with a weapon, a body part, a hand, an elbow, a knee, a foot, or any other implement. So I understand the point, but again, this is someone who is restrained already, and so yes, I would agree with you, Mr. Katz. The point here is the threat of serious bodily injury. It doesn't have to happen, but if what they do, if you're handcuffed and you reach for a gun, or I hate doing scenarios, but that is a threat of serious bodily injury, even if the gun doesn't go off, or if you're trying to strike the officer, same thing. I mean, I don't know if you're talking about the level of injury required, or the threat of it, or which standard, but I think that's the goal of this.
Well, and of course, for the level of injury, you don't know that till after the fact.
I'll yield to other. I mean, that was really most of my questions. I mean, I agree with the actively resisting versus the passive, which was in the original statement, and that makes sense. I'll yield. Let others ask questions. Thank you for answering.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer.
Thanks. Well, I just wanted to ensure that we have a motion, and it's been seconded. In general, I agree with the motion as far as seconded. But
okay, I wasn't sure, and there was some question back and forth. But Councilmember Giwando did make the motion to amend it this way. Councilmember Reamer has seconded it. I see no other council members that want to speak on this topic. So all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously. Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Wellens, could you please go to the next topic?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The next topic is the issue of no-knock warrants, regarding no-knock warrants, the Public Safety Committee had recommended prohibiting the use of no-knock warrants and also any type of entry without knocking and announcing to situations in which certain types of serious crimes are at issue, and also only when there are exigent circumstances. At the July 21 council meeting, the full council discussed the Public Safety Committee's recommendation and also discussed the possibility of amending the recommendation to make the list of crimes that would justify the use of a no-knock warrant, to make that list more precise, and in particular to refer to a section of the Maryland state law, the criminal law section 14101. Subsequent to that discussion, the police department has shared some language that they would recommend in connection with this issue of no-knock warrants, and their amendment appears at circle 58 of your packet, and the basic differences between their recommended amendment and the ones that have been discussed was that in addition to the crimes of violence as specified in the Maryland Code, they would also suggest that no-knock warrants be permitted in certain circumstances when an offense related to firearms possession is at issue, and also when an extreme risk protection order has been issued by a judge in which an individual who is basically deemed dangerous to themselves and others and has been ordered to relinquish firearms but has failed to do so, it would cover those types of situations. In addition, the police department's amendments would also require some additional specific findings that the officers would have to make before conducting a no-knock entry, regarding the dangerousness of the individual at the premises, or whether the premises is booby-trapped. Then, and I know this is a little complex. We have, vying amendments and amendments upon amendments. I did email to the council members earlier today, although I'm sorry it's not in your packet, a Word document in which I attempted to kind of consolidate the various options into one document using the police department amendment as kind of the basis of that, because theirs has sort of the most components in it. So I don't know, Mr. President, is it okay for me to refer to that document that was emailed around, or if folks don't know what I'm talking about, I can try to just talk through it.
Well, I do think that we probably will go through the document so it's very clear. But Councilmember Jawando wanted to speak, and then followed by Councilmember Albernaz, and then we'll get back. Please, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Ms. Wellens. And I do think that document was very helpful. It's still complicated. Couple of points. Bottom line here, I think we should stick with what the Public Safety Committee initially voted through, with the exception for making sure that the additional sexual assault is added, which I think Ms. Wellens made mention of. And here's the reason, or some of the reasons why, and I'm sure we'll have a discussion about this as we should. If you look about why SWAT teams and no-knock warrants came about, it really was the war on drugs. And that is primarily how they are used around the country and here in Montgomery County. And the data that was sent to us that from the police department in our packet, if you look in for the last several years, for the last 4 years, which is what was sent, the vast majority of cases where no-knock warrants have been used, which would be prohibited under the amendment that was passed out of the Public Safety Committee, the vast majority are for distribution of CDS, which controlled substances, which is marijuana, drugs. And in 2017, 43 of the 110 no-knock warrants were for possession or distribution of CDS, which was clarified to me can also be possession. It does not have to be distribution. I sought that clarity from the police department last night, and Ms. Wellens checked in. So you could just possess the drug or be selling it, either or. I would argue in either instance we shouldn't be doing a no-knock warrant in that instance. And then the number two, but way behind, is prohibited firearms. If you have an illegal or unregistered firearm. And in 2017, for example, that accounted for 11 of the 110, as opposed to 43 of the 43 for distribution of CDS. The way the chart was broken down, all the exceptions we lay out, murder, rape, sexual assault, armed robbery, first-degree assault, those were all covered and would be allowed under this exception, under this amendment. And I just think it's important that even what the police came back with, and I clarified this as well, and this would be a big step forward. I think we need to do it for the guns as well. But even what they're offering would not allow them to go in for drug cases. So the amendment before you, and if Chief Jones can clear this up, my reading of it and what we confirmed with Ms. Wellens is that the amendment even put forward by the police, which again I'm not supportive of, I think we should stick with what we originally did, which would do this as well, would eliminate almost 40% of the reasons that they use no-knock warrants right now to go in for distribution or possession of controlled substances. I also think, considering that 4 in 10 of Americans have guns, there's more guns than people in the United States, and if you look at the cases around the country, it's just not a safe practice, absent some extreme circumstances, kidnapping, hostage situation, and the like, that we should be allowing folks to go in and utilize these warrants. And then, for now, I'll pause for now, but I want to give you a quote from the National Tactical Officers Association, which is a law enforcement group. which you would think would be all for no-knock warrants, but they really say they should be used very sparingly. And the former head of that from 2012 to 2015, a gentleman by the name of Robert Chavali, who was the group's chairman, he said it makes no sense, and he was a SWAT veteran who retired from Dayton, Ohio Police Department in 2015. Why would you run into a gunfight? If we were going to risk our lives, we risk them for a hostage, for a citizen, for a fellow officer. You definitely don't go in and risk your life for drugs. And again, these warrants are used primarily in drug cases, nationally and in Montgomery County. And so I just think that doesn't even addresses the officer safety. That does not address the trauma and the potential loss of life. We've had someone killed with a no-knock warrant in Montgomery County this year. So I think we need to consider that. So I would recommend and move that. Well, I guess I don't need to move because it's in the bill. I would recommend that we would keep the language as presented from the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you. Chief, did you want to comment on this, please?
Yes. So thank you, Mr. President. So the one thing I want to say again is that as Mr. Duwando just noted, in the case in which we just unfortunately someone was killed in that case. But what I can say that there was a booby trap that would have seriously injured officers on a regular knock and announce type of warrant. If we had gone into that residence not knowing the way that we did it and I really can't speak a whole lot more on it, but that would have really injured or potentially killed one of our officers in that case. I will also note to what Mr. Duwando noted about possession of drugs that we do no-knock warrants. That's not correct. I don't know where you got that information from, but we only were doing no-knock warrants.
In your office.
If I could finish, please, sir. We were only doing no-knock warrants for felony drug cases, possession with intent to distribute or distribution of drugs. And it's not just that we're doing no-knock warrants based upon the fact that we're going in after for drug dealers, but the fact of the matter is that the individuals, and this is what needs to be understood by the council, is that it's not about what the crime is. What it is that you have to exhibit that the individual or the target of that investigation or someone in that residence has a propensity of violence. And it's highly likely upon you serve it. And even when you do a no-knock search warrant, you are going into the residence immediately upon entry yelling, "Police, search warrant, get on the ground." That is yelled by every team member in a very rapid manner, repeated over and over as we go in to do these high-risk type warrants, and we do them safely. I remind this council that over the 40 years of our SWAT team, we've done 8,000 search warrants, 8,000 in the history of this police department. And we've only had 3 shootings in that 8,000 search warrants. So with that being said, I just wanted to be able to, again, really make sure everyone understands what a no-knock search warrant is that it's an addition, it's not just the crime itself. And we have really agreed to these enumerated crimes that we think are really the most serious and violent type crimes, or have some connection that if there is a propensity of violence, again, if for example, even if you have a murder investigation, a search warrant that you're doing, and that the individual, for example, is already under arrest, you wouldn't be doing a no-knock search warrant. Or if you had an individual that was wanted for child pornography, as an example, or even a rape or sexual offense, but you couldn't articulate that this person has a propensity for violence in that document, you wouldn't be applying for a no-knock search warrant. This is for the most egregious cases. And so in the cases that we think that there is that high propensity, that gives us an advantage in serving these warrants, that allows us to get to be on top of the situation and to be able to handle it in the safest manner, not only for the officers involved, but for the individuals and the residents, as well as the community at large. And that's what's really important in this regard.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, and I really appreciate this discussion. I've learned a tremendous amount about this issue, and once again, I very much appreciate and respect where my colleague and friend, Councilmember Jawando, is coming from at this, and also understand where he's coming at this from in terms of, leaving the language the way that it is. And it was discussed extensively in committee. But I did also find our conversation at our last full council session enlightening and helpful as well. And I've had further conversations with people associated with the Family Justice Center, that deal with victims of domestic violence and the complexities that are involved in a number of those cases. And I completely agree that we absolutely need to restrict no-knock warrants to the absolute and complete most extreme cases to ensure the safety of the officers, to ensure the safety of the residents of the property that they are entering, and the neighbors or the corresponding people who may be impacted. And we all want to avoid the absolutely tragic and egregious abuses of power that we have seen across the country. But there are horrific incidents that are difficult for us to process and difficult for us to comprehend that do call for, in my opinion, to be used judiciously as possible, but in the event of emergencies, such as domestic violence, such as child abuse, or the development of firearms such as ghost guns, which is a very real issue and on the rise. We are also seeing 3D printers that are being developed and that can actually make guns in people's homes. And so I think that we do need to give law enforcement some degree of flexibility here in order to address those situations as they may arise and not unintentionally create a situation in which we put people at risk. And so I'm weighing all of this. It's a very important and complicated issue. But I do agree with the amendments and I'd like to hear a little bit more from my colleagues as well. But understand where law enforcement is coming from with those amendments and respect the space that they are coming from. So given that, I just wanted to share my thoughts at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have similar concerns just like you do. I mean, no one wants anyone to be placed in an unsafe situation, but it's very easy for us to be sitting here in a safe situation and saying that nothing could ever be unsafe. And unfortunately, that is not correct, even here in Montgomery County. I mean, just last week in Germantown, we had a young lady shot in the head. And literally miles from Montgomery County's border, we had an 11-year-old child killed in the District of Columbia. I mean, and so we have to understand that as safe as we feel, that we need to give the people who are keeping us safe the tools necessary to do that. And they have to keep themselves safe as well. So I believe, and I certainly want to hear from my colleagues as well, but I believe what is being suggested by the police department is reasonable and is not something that would put the public in harm's way, but would certainly keep the public in a safer way. Councilmember Reamer.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm confused here as to what amendments we're talking about. So I would appreciate it if we could just step back for a second. We have a committee recommendation which the council took up last time. Did we amend that at all last time?
We did amend it. I put a motion forward that passed to add the laws in 14101.
Yes,
that included the 22 provisions where you can go in on a no-knock warrant.
Right. So, but we had talked in the committee. We had talked about exigent circumstances, and that was a clarification, I guess, the way to say it, of the exigent circissstances. Yes.
First of all, Councilmember Jawando just said we should go back to the committee version. I think he means the amended committee version.
I did. I misspoke.
Fine. So it's not that we're going back to anything. right now what is before us is an amended committee version, and now the question is, are we going to amend it further? I wanted to sort of, one thing I think we probably all agree is that whatever language we adopt, it should have the child pornographer, the child abuse, those specific provisions. And Christine had emailed those around. Christine, is it fair to say that any version of this no-knock warrant segment could have that language added, and we're not really, is that accurate?
That is accurate. Whether you were to adopt the police department suggested language or the language that was discussed last week that Councilmember Juando has proposed, you could certainly add to either of those this concept that the issues were child abuse, child pornography, domestic violence, and terrorism. Those types of offenses were not completely covered by the criminal law section 14101. So that's why they would be added separately.
Can you please explain what is the amendment that we are now discussing? There's been a request for some additional language, I think, from the police department. And so I think we are debating that now, if I understand, although I don't think anyone has moved the police department's amendment. But I think we are essentially, this is why we shouldn't actually debate things unless someone moves it, but it's okay. So what is the police department's amendment? Can you please walk through that?
Okay. So the police department's amendment, as distinct from the revision of the Public Safety Committee's amendment that was discussed last week, and I'm sorry for the...
It's nothing to apologize for. This is all happening in real time, and we won't have a lot of time.
So the police department amendment, it's at circle 58 of your packet, and it would do a few things. It would, first of all, provide that the police directives regarding no-knock warrants would not necessarily be in the use of force policy. They would be, they could be in search warrant policy or some other standalone policy. Obviously, they would be related. I don't think that's a very big substantive issue, but I think given the complexity, the police department wants to make sure it can have a separate policy related to no-knock warrants and not necessarily include it within their primary use of force policy. So that's one thing that it would do. Then, in addition, it would state that only SWAT team members can enter into a private premises without first knocking and announcing their presence.
They asked for a change on that, right, Christine?
So I did discuss with them a change on that because I think that, well, let me just read what I think would be, and then the police department can correct me. But so the policy directive, and again, could be separate from the use of force policy, that it would have to address no-knock warrants. The policy directive, the minimum. Oh, sorry.
So just as a starter, so the department's proposed amendment would say that the chief must issue a directive, and then it puts some conditions on that directive. So
correct.
Continue.
Right. Must issue the directive that regulates when officers may seek or participate in the execution of no-knock warrants or enter private premises without first knocking and announcing the officer's presence. So that's the baseline. And then there would be minimum standards for this no-knock warrant policy, including that the no-knock entries. That the no-knock warrants could be executed only by members of the SWAT team, which is my understanding what the current policy is. So they would be codifying that current requirement. Next, that if an officer wants to participate in the execution of a no-knock warrant, and I would suggest that also if they want to enter into a private premises without first knocking and announcing their presence, there would have to be the following findings. First, exigent circumstances, and that's the same as what the Public Safety Committee recommended. Second, other methods of serving the warrant, including methods which would mitigate risk, have been considered and have been determined to A, pose unacceptable risk to the life or safety of executing officers or another person, or B, be futile. So that would be some additional findings that were not originally in the Public Safety Committee recommendation. Next, the crime in being investigated would have to be a crime of violence as defined in Maryland Criminal Law Section 14-101, and that was discussed last week and as part of Councilmember Joando's amendment to the Public Safety Committee's recommendation. But it could also be, the crime could also be related to firearms possession or related to a warrant obtained under Section 5-607 of the Public Safety Article of the Maryland Code, and those are those extreme risk protection orders.
Okay, so that is why Councilmember Joando made the comment about firearms, because they're seeking to be able to do these if there's a suspicion of firearms.
Okay. Correct. So then this would be the place where, if desired, the council could add those additional crimes of related to child abuse, child pornography, domestic violence, or terrorism. Then next in the police department's amendments, there would be a requirement before the no-knock entry that at least one of the following factors is present. Reasonable suspicion that a person is present at the location who has demonstrated a propensity for violence, or reasonable suspicion that entry into the location has been fortified, is booby-trapped, or has unique characteristics which would make knocking and announcing one's presence inherently unsafe. And then lastly, the police department amendment would require the chief of police to annually provide a public report indicating the number of no-knock search warrants served by the Montgomery County Police SWAT team, including statistics on the number of warrants served on behalf of the Montgomery County Police Department or on behalf of another agency at a location within Montgomery County.
Now, could you please help us understand the distinction between this proposal and what is before the council, which is the amended committee version?
Okay, so the differences are, one, that under the police department proposal, the policy would be located in a different place. It wouldn't necessarily be contained within the use of force policy. I don't think that's a huge substantive matter, but that would be a difference. Then the next difference is that only SWAT members would be allowed to participate in the execution of no-knock warrants. That is the case already, what the police department does, but if we want to put that in the bill, the police department amendment actually puts that in the law, codifies that. And then we have the difference that I think the big difference is really what you had identified, Councilmember Reamer, and Councilmember Joando, the firearms possession as a predicate for doing a no-knock warrant. If you, under the Public Safety Committee's recommendation, and as discussed last week, Councilmember Joando's amendment, firearm possession would not be a basis upon which you could execute a no-knock warrant. So that's different, plus the extreme risk protection orders. And then the reporting would be different, the annual report by the chief of police, that's added under the police department proposal. And then also the specific findings that would have to be made about that the officer would have considered other methods and had to have made the determination that those would pose unacceptable risk or be futile. And also, there would have to be a finding that the person at the premises had a propensity for violence, or there was some other circumstance in which the premises was booby-trapped, or otherwise there were unique features that would make it unsafe to knock and announce. So I know that's a lot, but there are some similarities and some differences.
My question here is, if I understand it correctly, it seems like if the crime is related to firearms possession, then a no-knock warrant could be served. And that would seem to cover almost, any imagined, like a lot of crime, right? A lot of crime is committed with a gun. What, Chief, can you help me understand here? That seems to me to be very permissive.
Well, when we look at firearms violations, particularly prohibited firearms, as we starting to see this be on the rise and seeing more firearms violations in our county, as I noted last week, in 46% of the no-knock warrants that were served, we received. There were guns in the residence when we went there.
Can I ask you, is what you're getting at that this is a house where there is illegal firearms that are like, someone has an arsenal of illegal firearms, or is
may not
someone committed a robbery, and you're trying to arrest them for having committed a robbery with a gun, a month previous?
Well, it's not so much about, again, everyone has to understand what is a search warrant. So a search warrant, again, is twofold. It's not that you're necessarily going in to arrest an individual who's wanted. That's not what this is about. You're not going in to arrest the individual. You're actually going in for crimes. You're going in to do a search for crimes, for the evidence of that is connected to a crime. And so, for example, the individual may be wanted for a robbery that may have been committed. And so, yes, the robbery might have noted the fact that the individual had that was armed with a gun. That can be added as the exigent circumstances. That is, it's more than likely, it's probable cause to believe that the individual that we're doing the search warrant has a gun in that residence. But there's also the crimes that we're also investigating that no one is under arrest at that point in time, but we have probable cause to believe that individuals, for example, are in possession of illegal firearms, that they're making ghost guns, that they're distributing ghost guns in our community. Those are the sorts of things. There are different types of crimes. But again, when you're doing your investigation and you're applying for search warrants, you're gathering that intelligence in order to confirm and provide that information to the judge about whether or not you have this belief based upon, whether an individual, another witness saw the individual with the gun. Another individual's been in a home and knows that this individual has guns. There's a lot of circumstances that surround these types of incidents, but they have to be documented within the warrant application when you're requesting a no-knock exception that gives the judge some indication that there is more than likely some illegal weapons in that residence. So that's why we look at firearms prohibition as well as the extreme risk protection order, because the extreme risk protection order, which is already signed by a judge, that gives us, we've already have probable cause to believe that the individual has guns in that residence are registered to them, and that they are a danger to themselves and to others. This is why the state of Maryland basically put this law into place in order to save people's lives, and for us to be able to seize those weapons from those individuals and to make sure that those weapons are seized, and the court then makes a final determination of when that individual, gets those weapons back. And those could be legal weapons, but the court has ordered us to go in and take those weapons from that individual because of what has been proven is that individual is a danger to himself or others.
And is it your belief if you don't have that language that you would not be allowed to do that under the...
Well, not based upon the original committee's bill, we would not be allowed to do that. And I think that's a mistake. That's just my personal belief is I think that needs to be added because I think extreme risk protection orders have proven to be, in cases that those are, those are real. I mean, some cases are, are very sensitive, but from the standpoint of, or maybe dangerous for us to have to go in and actually get those weapons from those individuals who've already been deemed to be unstable.
Thank you. I'll pass to my colleagues.
Thank you. Chief, just to be clear, on the red flag law for domestic violence, when a court orders that the guns in a domestic violence household need to be taken from that person, that they can't possess those firearms, would that be an instance when you would need to go in and make certain that the SWAT team or whoever is getting those weapons, that's one of those instances when that would be necessary?
Yeah, and I'll also let Haley Roberts, because she's my expert on the red flag law, and I'll let Haley note some cases about that.
So the red flag laws are, while there are circumstances in which the extreme risk protective orders are obtained in relation to a domestic violence case, extreme risk protective orders are truly because someone is in immediate and present danger to themselves or others, and they possess or have access to firearms. So these are cases in which an individual may be, an emergency evaluation has been obtained for them. The firearms may be in the home that they're located in. They could be someplace else. And there are situations in which there may be times in which a search warrant is needed because consent can't be obtained or the firearms can't otherwise be taken safely. If it's a true domestic violence protective order and it's the extreme risk protective order isn't involved, that's a matter that the sheriffs handle. But if it's an extreme risk protective order, that's a situation where we've had instances of barricade situations involving the extreme risk protective orders. We've had situations in which we've gotten the extreme risk protective orders and then individuals have gone and acquired a firearm by some other means after the fact. Or there have been aggravating circumstances. So if the extreme risk protective order is issued, be it an interim, a temporary, or a final, at the conclusion of the final, a year later, when it expires, you can ask for a 6-month extension. And we have had situations where we've asked for the extension, and during that period of time, we've had other instances where we've come into contact with the individuals. So there are circumstances in which it would be necessary to utilize the SWAT team based upon all the facts and circumstances that you know about that particular case and the circumstances surrounding that individual. Now, the search warrant, the law allows for a search warrant, but it's not necessarily the criminal violation would be the violation of the ERPO.
Thank you. And Chief, can you explain the difference for the policy versus a directive?
It's really the same, right? It's we call them our directives, but it's basically our policy. So the way that we terminology is we will issue a directive to the officers, and in this case, I think again this type of the relevance of no-knock warrant needs to be in our search warrant policy, which we have, which is already in place, and I think that would be relevant due to the fact of its connectivity, and really it's in line with talking about search warrant service and what's allowed versus what's not allowed.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really good conversation. Trying to dive into the details so that we all understand this. And during the course of this conversation of trying to hone in on how far we allow, if we allow, no-knock warrants to occur, there was a posting that a resident who lives a few blocks away from me posted on a neighborhood listserv 2 weeks ago. And I want to read this, and then Chief Jones, I would appreciate your thoughts on what I'm about to read. And this was public. I'm not going to use any names, but I was home alone, with our youngest son, when the police burst into our home. They said a neighbor reported that someone had broken into my house and stolen my car. We have 2 cars. One was dead. My husband drove our other car to the store to get jumper cables, which we did indeed need. I understand how someone can see this as a simple misunderstanding, but my husband, who is Hispanic, has lived a lifetime of these, quote, misunderstandings. There's context preceding and after that, but clearly Montgomery County Police Department burst into this constituent's home because a neighbor a few doors down thought someone was suspicious. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, while we're concentrating on no-knock warrants, this doesn't seem to be any type of warrant. And so I'm just even more confused about how we stop this type of incident from happening, where law-abiding residents are living their lives and somebody down the block calls the police because of the color of their skin, and we have officers bursting into their homes. Is that relevant to a no-knock warrant conversation? Is that relevant to the exigent circumstances which are in this bill and seem to be, quite frankly, just an open door to these types of situations? Chief?
So, Mr. Glass, first of all, that's not a search warrant. From the way you described it, I would need to look into that matter to be able to give you an honest reply based upon circumstances and for the officers involved, and what information did they have based upon what the person who posted that has stated. That seems to be way out of line. It has no relevance to anything that we would do from a search warrant standpoint. So again, when we look at search warrants, and we're doing a search warrant that has been approved by a judge, whether it's a no-knock or a regular search warrant, and we're utilizing a SWAT team, there is information that's already been gathered. There is a plan that goes into this, and there's decisions that are being made by executive officers in regards things that the way that you describe about responding to some call is something that's being handled by sort of our first line officers that are out there. And that troubles me based upon what I'm hearing. And I'd be more than willing to look into that matter, because that's something that's totally out of line the way it's described. Now, again, I'd be more interested in really getting into the details of exactly what occurred there from that perspective. But that's not the relevancy of what we would do in a search warrant situation.
Sure, right. And I appreciate that response, because it makes me question this entire conversation. That we're talking about no-knock warrants and trying to define exactly when a warrant under these circumstances can be given. But then we have examples of what I just described. And let me say, I do know the homeowners. They are engaged, active citizens in Montgomery County. And so I take them at their word from what they wrote. But we can limit within the scope of this legislation whatever we want, but then we still have these actions taking place. That troubles me. And so while we're talking about defining narrowly a no-knock warrant, we have to have this broader conversation that we need to stop this. And I'm going to, err on the side of making sure that this doesn't happen, that law-abiding citizens are not subject to these types of actions. And having read this public comment from a listserv, it muddles the water even further for me and troubles me even deeper to know that this is happening and it's not even germane to this conversation. Right. So I'm going to yield back. I see the President motioning, but I'm just further troubled. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Gilando.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Glass and Mr. Reamer. I I think the chief said something that I want to go back to so that we can get facts on the record here. I do agree that we need to remember what a search warrant is. I think we've gotten in the weeds and we've lost context a little bit. That of the, I think the chief said last week 600 or so, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the number of search warrants that are issued, I think that's about right. 180, 200, so roughly a third are no-knock. A search warrant is the written permission, a legal document from a judge to enter in search of premises related to the suspicion of finding something related to a crime. And the Supreme Court, to Councilmember Glass's point, I think the Fourth Amendment has been eroded to the point that in 2003, the Supreme Court, Fourth Amendment outlawing unlawful searches and seizures, has ruled that even if you have a regular search warrant, that you only need wait 15 to 20 seconds before knocking down the door. And that was eroded even further in a subsequent Supreme Court case that said, well, if you go sooner than 15 to 20, you can present evidence of why it was necessary to do so in a case, and it could be understood. So that, and even in a normal search, all we're talking about here and limiting in this bill is actually giving someone a chance before the door breaks down to know in certain circumstances, and we have a wide berth of exceptions here, all those 21 crimes, and I actually agree with the domestic violence, terrorism, child abuse, and booby traps, all of which, and the extreme risk protection orders. Obviously, we don't want people to have guns that could cause violence. I agree with adding all those. So we are giving a lot of latitude on top of already a lot of latitude in a normal search warrant environment case. And so I just think we need to understand that context. And then I want to go back to, I'm sorry, Mr. If Gabe, you have a question related to that?
No, I agree with everything you just said. I just, and I'll yield back. Sorry. I'm
Okay.
I'll go.
No problem. The one thing I do want to go back to is the question, and thank you, Ms. Wellens, for running us through the list of the drugs. Again, in the amendment that was passed that's before us now, drug possession or distribution would not be a reason you could go in for possession go apply for a no-knock warrant. I stated in my opening statement that that is the vast majority of why no-knock warrants have been done, which was not disputed. The chief did say that it could only be used for felony distribution. I have an email that he is on at 7:41 last night from his staff member, Lieutenant Nick Persino. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, who's also, I think, on here, to Christine and Susan Farag and Willie Parker Lone and several others, that says, yes, CDS, controlled dangerous substances, is what that means, and it would cover all crimes related to drugs, parent, distribution, and possession. And it goes on to say other things. So either Lieutenant was wrong, and that's fine, we all make mistakes, or what you said was not true. So I would just like to know which one is correct.
So, again, I just want to make sure that we're clear. Possession of drugs is a misdemeanor. And we don't do no-knock warrants in most misdemeanor cases.
But you could.
So for drug cases, we have a strong line about felony drug cases and no-knock warrants. And so we're not doing no-knock warrants for possession cases. And we rarely do search warrants. It's a rarity. The crimes we're looking for is the distribution of drugs. That's what we're focusing on when we do search warrants. And we can do search warrants for possession, but we're not utilizing a SWAT team in order to do that.
And I understand that you're saying that that's an internal policy that you standard, which I think is
that's
appropriate.
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
But you do have the authority to do so. Was my point, and was the question that was asked and answered.
Well, we have the authority, but just because we have the authority to do something doesn't. Just like you have the authority to do a no-knock warrant for destruction of evidence, but we don't do that. Right. And so Montgomery County Police, we have stringent rules that we put into place that we think are good, to make sure that our folks, we don't go outside the box about and utilizing this law in a careless manner.
So then it would be correct to assume that all 43 of the distribution of CDS cases that utilized no-knock warrants in 2017 and 2018, and 39 in 2019 and 10 this year so far, all of those were related to felony distribution of drugs.
Yes, and what I would say, Mr. Giwando, I've already agreed in principle, right, that to eliminate doing drug search warrants in the no-knock rules.
I appreciate that.
If you look at what we propose, we've eliminated that. So this discussion for me means I'm prepared to move on. Right?
All right. I appreciate that. I think that's significant. But I think it bears understanding that most of the no-knocks, you're willing to eliminate the thing that most of the no-knocks go to. So I don't think we should.
So it's 60% of our warrants. So
right.
we'll be lessening the amount of no-knocks done here in Montgomery County based on the past 4 years of statistics.
Got
I'm willing to make a change within the department in order to do that.
I appreciate that. And the last thing I wanted to ask was related to the guns and the propensity for violence. And I would agree with you that it shouldn't just be based on a crime. Obviously, that's part of the factor, and you acknowledge that because even in the amendment that you all sent over, you included, and last week you agreed with that list of crimes of violence. And I think there's an agreement to add to this list the things that we've discussed. The possession of a gun, to Councilmember Reamer's point, and propensity for violence, that, again, the second number highest of going in is on prohibited firearms. And, again, realizing you have the authority already under a search warrant, you have surveillance that you can do. There's a lot of ways that you can effectuate searches and or arrests. I'm not understanding why you're so adamant about with the increased danger and risk that comes from these potentially, and trauma. Again, we're not talking about the trauma. You don't have to get shot or killed for these types of things to really negatively impact you. And we also haven't talked about who these happen to and where the communities that they happen. And we had a discussion on data. The ACLU did a study a few years ago of 20 cities. We were not one of them, unfortunately. But 45% of the people who had no-knocks used against them were black. I don't know what our numbers are. I don't know if you do. But
I don't.
I think.
But what I will tell you is we focus on the behavior. And we focus on the facts and what's presented in the warrant. We're not focusing on the race. We're focusing on the cases that we're investigating. And I'll also note to you that out of 600 warrants, right, where the majority of the warrants are not even served by our SWAT team. Okay, so we make sometimes decisions to do a search warrant a different kind of way. If we know that we can make it the safest possible, that's why even in our proposal, it notes about these provisions that we will make sure that we review and we look at mitigating circumstances. We do that for every case. When we make arrests, when we make certain tactical arrests, we make decisions that put us in the best place possible for the safety of our officers, the citizens, and those that we're arresting.
And I appreciate that, and I'm not suggesting that you don't do that. What I'm trying to suggest is a policy consideration. There are other things than who was shot and who was killed in factoring in whether these things should be used. It should be, can we do it in another way, as you do many times, as you suggested. So the last question I have for you is the propensity for violence, which is seems like another very large exception here, which is a subjective judgment assuming based by the officer or the supervisor. I want you to talk about that. Is this because someone is thought to be in the home that committed a crime with a gun, or that they have an assault history? How are you judging propensity for violence?
So generally, again, based upon your investigation of the target of the investigation, you are looking at the person's past criminal history. That's a factor that you'll look into. You may be looking at the current crime that you're actually investigating. about the actions that this individual has already has been alleged to have conducted. There's also, again, we're looking at other factors of incidents that may have occurred that this individual has already shown this propensity for violence. And again, that's the evidence that's presented to the judge. And the judge then has to make that decision based upon what you have presented, whether that's relevant or not in that particular case.
Yeah, and one thing that you and I agree with 100%, I think, or maybe I think we agree with, is that judges need to do. There's a problem with our judicial system on approval rates of these, and this is nationwide, because a lot of times they're being approved. Similarly here, very few are rejected, and I know, and I agree that that's something that we need to look at as well. I would just say that the policy question for us is, again, this bill as amended, and it probably is further amended to include these other crimes or potential crimes, gives wide berth already. And I don't think we need to make the door even wider. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you. So I see this in a different light. I see this as tamping down on the use of no-knock warrants significantly. We heard it from the chief, and that's what we wanted to do. I mean, in light of everything else that this bill does, and in light of the other things that we're looking to do, I really feel as though we're headed in the right direction. And so, while again, you can debate things ad nauseum, whether or not this minute piece means that there'll be a small loophole here or there, if all the other reforms that we're looking to do are also taking place, I have a feeling that we're going to get to where we want to be. I mean, that's truly what this is about. It isn't just about one bill being the panacea, and in this case, one small part of a bill being the ultimate panacea in terms of solving all the problems that we have, from judicial issues to individual officers, all those kinds of things. We still have to fix those things, right? And so just by leaving that or putting in a clause or taking out a clause doesn't eliminate those things that will still be there. I mean, it highlights what Councilmember Glass, I think, was alluding to, is that we still have to address those other outside issues also to really get at the crux of what it is that we're trying to do here, which means that our police are doing what they need to keep our communities safe and also protecting all lives to the best of their ability. And so when I look at this, when I look at the explanation of what's there, and I did want to highlight one of the things that, Chief, you have in your amendments that I think is important, because it doesn't just say about judgment of propensity of violence, it says demonstrated. And that to me says something more than just a person thinks that they have a propensity of violence. When I see the word demonstrated, that means that they've done something, something that you have to then go back to and justify saying that happened. Not just, well, I think this person has a bad attitude and they may have access to a gun, so therefore that to me means a propensity of violence. No, it says demonstrated. So I do feel as though, and I really do agree with Councilmember Joanno and yourself. It's great to hear that you both are saying we're taking out the drug pieces. I mean, that's a huge issue, especially for our communities of color, who we know are oftentimes pushed into that because they don't have anything else in terms of ways to make money. That's real. And so taking that off is going to mean tremendous strides when it comes to no-knock warrants and the use on people of color. And so I really feel as though this is a great step for us. Again, is it perfect? None of it is. Not the whole bill, and use of force isn't perfect. There's still so many other things that we need to look at. When it came to Carteroid, we talked about that. What makes sense, what doesn't make sense, having the knee, having the chokehold, all of it we can argue and say and try and make it perfect. Let's not get in the way of the great good that's going to come out of this, and more to come, right? It'd be different if this was the last bill, this is the last thing that we could do, and we can't even revisit it. Well, that's not the case. We can revisit this as soon as we come back in September. So from that perspective, I say, and I think we've got a great step moving forward. And so I think I'm going to support the amendments proposed by the chief. I think it makes sense. It significantly reduces the amount of no-knock warrants that we have to very exigent circumstances, which is what I've heard from the community is something that they want to see. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Alvarez.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. This conversation has been enlightening, and it sounds, Councilmember Jawando, like you are open to changing some of the language as has been proposed in the amendments by the police department. And I heard Councilmember Reamer in his comments make similar comments. There may be a delta of difference, but I think to move this forward procedurally, and I agree with everything that Councilmember Rice said with regards to this significantly overhauling the manner in which we do no-knock warrants, to Councilmember Jawando's point, but still acknowledging some of those unique circumstances that may take place that it sounds like those that have spoken so far on this issue agree is important to note. Things like child pornography, things like domestic violence. So I would like to move that we move forward MCPD's recommendations for further amendments, with the caveat, Ms. Wellens, that you go through if there are some items that are still, if there's a delta of disagreement, we go through those now. But to get this going and move it procedurally, I move that we accept MCPD's additional addendum recommendations.
Is there a second? It's been seconded by Councilmember Rice. It was moved by Councilmember Alvarez, seconded by Councilmember Rice. Ms. Wellens, did you want to go through any changes that are, as Councilmember Alvarez pointed out?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President and Councilmember Alvarez. So the changes I would point out, the potential changes for your consideration, potential changes to the police department's amendments would be as follows. First of all, under subsection 2 of their amendment, where they're talking about the SWAT team conducting the no-knock entries, you might wish to change that, and this is pursuant to some clarifications that I had with the police department earlier today, and they can certainly correct me, but under that big letter A where it says, okay, so it reads, the policy directive issued under the subsection must at a minimum require that only officers assigned to the Montgomery County Police Special Weapons and Tactics SWAT team may enter into a private premises without first knocking and announcing their presence. Instead, it would read, only officers assigned to the Montgomery County Police Special Weapons and Tactics team, SWAT team, may participate in the execution of a no-knock warrant. And the reason for that change would be if there is a scenario, the exigent circumstances scenario that the Public Safety Committee discussed at length and was also discussed last week. If there's a scenario, for example, a hostage scenario, there's not time to get a no-knock warrant, you might want other officers who are not part of the SWAT team to nonetheless have the ability to enter a premises without, in other words, that it should not be limited necessarily simply to SWAT members to enter a premises in a scenario like that, like a school lockdown, some extreme scenario. All of the other criteria would still have to be met in terms of propensity for violence and the specific types of crimes. But again, so that potential change is
right,
saying.
So let's not go too quickly here. So the difference would be, so the addition would be for this, that not only would a SWAT team member be allowed to do it, but what was the actual wording?
So the wording would be that only officers assigned to the Montgomery County Police Special Weapons and Tactics SWAT team may participate in the execution of a no-knock warrant. So it would preserve that requirement that only SWAT can do the no-knock warrants. But if there's such an extreme circumstance, there's no time to get a warrant, you might want other officers to be able to participate in the entry as well.
And what would that language be?
I'm sorry, it's what I just read to you.
Well, what you just read to me is what is in there now. But you're saying that may, with only officers assigned to the Montgomery County Special Police Weapons, the SWAT team may enter into a private premises without first knocking. Didn't you say that another officer could be involved in that?
Enter versus participate, Mr. President. Participating being the difference, I believe.
So it would be, yes, it's a difference between whether you're saying that only SWAT can do no-knock warrants, or if you're saying only SWAT can do no-knock warrants plus only SWAT can enter a private premises without first knocking and announcing in any scenario whatsoever.
I see. Okay. Okay. Please, go on to the next one.
Mr. President, can we speak to those?
Yeah, sure, if you want. Councilmember Reamer was next on the line, and then it'll be you.
I was trying to understand what we're doing at the moment. Are you trying to amend the committee's version to reflect the chief's, or because the chief's version is what was moved and seconded? So,
just point of clarification, there are now potential amendments to our. There are potential amendments to our amendment, the amendment made by Councilmember Albornoz and seconded by me. And so there's been conversation from Councilmember Juando and others that maybe we want to tamper what the actual MCPD amendment is. And so I'm open, and as the seconder, and I think the sponsor said that he was also open to tampering that amendment down. So that's what we're entertaining now, amendments to the amendment.
And in fact, the sponsor
just from a procedural standpoint.
And in fact, the sponsor asked for the changes for Ms. Wellens to go through the changes.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if you were amending the text of the committee or the text of the chief's.
We are dealing with the amendment, the motion that was made by Councilmember Albornoz and seconded by Councilmember Rice.
I have an issue I wanted to bring up, but it's not to this specific. And so I'll get back into the queue.
So if I could just speak to this specific point, so we're clear, I am not advocating for the amendment to the amendment, because the amendment to the amendment makes it broader. We talked about, and I think rightly so, the chief has talked about how the SWAT team is highly trained and to do these types of no-knock warrants. And so what this amendment from the police department to their amendment would do is say that non-SWAT team officers can also conduct no-knock warrants or participate in. And so that's the way it was explained to me. If that's incorrect, someone can correct me, but that's how I understood it. Is that not what we're being offered here? What is the amendment then, Ms. Wellens?
Sorry, I'm having difficulty with my mute button. So the amendment would be to provide that only officers assigned to the SWAT team may participate in the execution of a no-knock warrant. That would be changing the original language proposed by the police department, in that their original language said that only the SWAT team may enter into a private premises without first knocking and announcing their presence. So this does make it narrower.
Okay, so did I misunderstand? Maybe there was another side conversation about I misunderstood. Okay, so then that is fine.
Yeah, sort of like never mind. Go ahead, Ms. Wellens. You're going to continue, please.
Okay, thank you,
Mr. President. Just a point of clarification in terms of procedural. So, Councilmember Albornoz, if you accept that as a friendly amendment to the amendment, and I also as the seconder do, then we can move forward with dispensing of these so that we now have the amended version of the amendment. So I just wanted to go through them in order, and they're more than
that's what I'm trying to do. That's
yes,
exactly because otherwise this is confusing anyhow. If we don't do it in order, we're in real trouble. Okay, so are we clear on this one, Councilmember Juando and others? Are we clear? Yes. Okay. Ms. Wellens, please.
Okay, so the next amendment to the amendment would be the very next provision of the police department amendments. That's under a paragraph B. It says, first I'll read it how the police department originally proposed, then I'll read the change that I am raising that has not been raised by the police department, I want to be clear, but that I think that you might want to consider. So as it's currently stated, it says an officer may not An officer may not participate in the execution of a no-knock warrant unless, and then it lists the exigent circumstances, other methods have been considered, etc. I think that that you might want to consider, this would be more of a return to what the Public Safety Committee proposed, is that, and it also goes to the point that Councilmember Glass was making earlier about not knocking and announcing when there is no warrant. So this would say, as amended, an officer may not enter into a private premises without first knocking and announcing their presence unless, and then it would go on to list the requirements, unless there are exigent circumstances. The other methods have been considered, and then the certain types of crimes are involved.
Okay. Chief, did you want to comment on that?
No, that was, I know that was a part of the first, the amendment, so that would be fine.
Okay. Councilmember Alvarez and Councilmember Rice, are you?
That's
okay?
fine with me.
Okay, and we have a thumbs up from Councilmember Rice. Any other comments?
Can you read the section? This is section 2B.
2B.
Or not
to be. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. All right, it's late. It's good. It's later than it should be. Okay.
So what is it again? I just want to make sure we're clear. So 2B. Go ahead, Ms. Wellens. Could you state it one more time?
Sure. It would say an officer may not enter into a private premises without first knocking and announcing their presence unless exigent circumstances exist, other methods of serving the warrant, etc.
So you're just talking about B. You're not to B1, 2, and 3 yet. You're working your way down to those.
Yes.
All right.
Right. That's correct.
Okay. Are we good? Ms. Wellens, continue, please.
Okay. So then the next potential amendment to the amendments would be to add those types of offenses that were discussed earlier that are not included in Criminal Law 14101, but that the Public Safety Committee was interested in including, which included, so it would add.
Where are you adding it, Ms. Wellens?
I'm sorry. So we're at, wish I had line numbers on this. Okay, so we're under that paragraph
3A.
B that we were just discussing, and then little Roman numeral 3, and then you go down to if there's an A, B, and C. So yes. the amendment would be to add D.
So you're on circle 58 and circle 59. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So you would add that right now it says the crime being investigated is a crime of violence as defined by 14101A of the Criminal Law Article of the Maryland Code, is related to firearms possession or related to a warrant obtained under 5-607 of the Public Safety Article of the Maryland Code. Those are the extreme risk ones. So now after that you would add a little D saying related to child abuse, a little E saying related to child pornography, F related to domestic violence, or G related to terrorism.
Okay. We're good. Councilmember Albornoz, are you good? Councilmember Rice had his thumb up first. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Councilmember Joando, please.
I just wanted to this is a big change from the previous. It would put firearm possession back in. Obviously, we discussed it. I just want to make sure people are clear, which is the second highest number of no-knock warrants. So if you have a unregistered gun, you could use a no-knock warrant. I know the ghost gun, we've talked about the whole panoply of things, but obviously this would bring in anyone who has a gun, is suspected of having a gun that is unregistered. You could issue a no-knock warrant. I think that's too broad. That's why I won't support the amendment, but I just wanted to make sure it was clear that colleagues knew that was what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Raymond.
Can we have the chief respond to that?
Oh, Chief, did you want to respond to that?
Again, I just think it's important for us to understand that, again, we look at each case. We are going to mitigate all circumstances when we do search warrants, when we know that we have individuals with prohibited firearms, ghost guns, and the like. But I think this is important, particularly in the world that we're in now, that gives us this flexibility to be able to utilize this in these cases. It's not going to be used in every case, but it's one of those things that I think it's an option that we must have in today's environment.
Can I just ask, because it doesn't say prohibited firearms, it just says firearms possession.
But again, it exhibits to the point being it's about that, again, when you look at these other factors that have to be present, that it has to be, a person who has demonstrated a propensity for violence, or, again, the other part about a home being fortified, booby-trapped, or the like.
Okay. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you. And I'm just going to say, Councilmember Joando, I hear you on this one. This is a tough one. It really is. But I will just say, just based on what we've had, I'm just speaking real talk from Germantown. We've had some significant incidents. We need to get some of these guns off the street. We have tremendous challenges here. I'm not going to speak for other districts and the challenges that they have, but I will just tell you here, and you can talk to Luis Cardona, you can talk to a lot of folks working in the village as well as here in Germantown and in Gaithersburg. We are having tremendous problems. And I'm going to tell you, that's the only reason why. If I don't have people still getting shot in Germantown Park and in the village, then it's not, maybe I'm looking at this a little bit different. But this is a case where, seriously, we just need to try and tamp this down. And I understand the concerns that you're talking about. I do. I really do. And this is a hard one. But for me, it's one in which that's where it kind of puts the tipping point and really gets me to, because there's no other way. I mean, the chief and I have talked about this. We've talked about gun buyback programs and all kinds of stuff. I talked about this with Chief Manger a long time ago. We've always had huge issues with gun possession, legal gun possession here in the Up County and in the Mid-County region. And so it's one that we've been trying to figure out different other kinds of ways to try and get rid of these guns. But I mean, seriously, this is one where I'm kind of stuck. So, but I just want to let you know that I do acknowledge and understand where you're coming from. I really do. This is a tough one for me, but one, and I just wanted to explain why.
Thank you. Ms. Wellens, continue, please.
Yes. So the next potential amendment to the police department's proposed amendments would be whether to include the recommendation of the Public Safety Committee to ban no-knock warrants and to ban any entry into private premises without knocking and announcing if the sole purpose of the entry is to prevent the destruction of evidence. And I believe the chief, already testified that in general, we don't use them in that context. I can read the specific language would that be helpful?
I think it would be, but Chief, you are in agreement with that one, I believe. He's shaking his head yes, so and I think we're okay on that one.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. President, I think we're almost done. Can I just say one comment on this? And I appreciate Councilman Rice's statement, and we're all distraught about gun violence. There's a lot of things we need to do. We just had a long conversation on youth development, which is a huge piece of this puzzle. I think this is a small sliver, and this is the lawyer in me, of when you can knock down someone's door without announcing. And I don't think you have to weigh all of these things of the potential harm of what you're gaining. And, obviously with this going through, we're going to have to say, we trust you to use this the right way. I would want to know, and one of the reasons I'm very supportive of the data, which is the final part of this that I'm sure we'll all agree on, is I think we need to know what these firearm cases are, what these what is happening. There needs to be some analysis of that, and the public needs to know. And so I appreciate what you said. I just wanted to say that. I appreciate it.
Very good. Yes, sir, please. Yes,
so,
Councilman Rice.
So Councilmember Joando, I agree with you, and I think that, again, that was one of the things I said in my first statement, that, look, we're not prohibited from coming back to this. If we see this data and we see that folks are using this in the wrong way and using this in something that is not going to be beneficial to the overall safety of our officers in our community, right? What we want to see, we can continue to change that, and we're not limited in that. We would have already had the discussion, and we can say, look, we're looking at the data. I mean, it'll be a no-brainer. I mean, it'll be very easy. I'll be one to support you. So I'm going to tell you right now, if the data shows that it's being misused and done in an inappropriate way, I'll be the first one to second your motion.
Okay. Ms. Wellens, please. Is there anything else?
Yes, Mr. President. So just two final issues, which I would characterize as sort of conforming amendments, which is that one, as you'll recall, we had a discussion about collective bargaining, and the Public Safety Committee recommended, and the Council had agreed last week, to add a provision stating that the minimum standards of the use of force policy adopted by the police chief under Section 35-22 must not be subject to bargaining. So if you're adopting the police's recommendation to have this no-knock warrant policy as separate from the use of force policy, I think you would want to say the minimum standards of the use of the policies adopted by the police chief under Section 35-22 must not be subject to bargaining, so that it's comprehensive, that it's not that you would bargain the no-knock part but not bargain the rest of the use of force. So that's one.
Councilmember Alvarez and Councilmember Rice, are you okay with the amendments? Yes, yes, okay. See no other comments. And Ms. Wellens, please continue.
So, and then I think the final conforming amendment would be that we have uncodified provisions stating that the use of force policy must be adopted, and also the written guidelines that have been added must be adopted within 6 months of the effective date of the act. So a question is, a potential amendment to the amendment is to add to that uncodified section that this new policy that we're creating on the no-knock warrants also must be adopted within 6 months of the bill becoming law.
Chief, do you have any comment on that? Yeah, you're okay on that? Councilman, excuse me?
I said it can be done, no problem. Yeah.
Very good. Councilmembers Albanaz and Councilmember Rice, we're good. Ms. Wellens, is that everything?
That's everything. I sure hope so, Mr. President. Thank you.
We can agree on that. I think that's a unanimous part on this amendment. So it has been moved. This is for the amendment now. It has been moved by Councilmember Albanaz and seconded by Councilmember Rice. All those in favor of the amendment, please.
I just want to speak to it. Can we speak to it?
Okay, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to signal I wouldn't be supporting it because I am, but I view this as the department coming back to us and saying, we understand what you want to do, and this is how we ask that you write this law so that we can meet your intent. I think there are very small differences between what the committee had recommended and this. That's how I'm, that's what I'm learning. That's what I'm interpreting here. So I think I'm going to support this on that basis. I also just want to add that a plug for Councilmember Rice in my bill on discipline. We're talking here about the criticality of setting parameters for the use of force. You need to also have, the chief has to have authority to enforce when officers do not follow these rules. And that is a separate but significant problem. So let's just remember, everything we're doing here has to be followed up with disciplinary power.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really appreciate all the work, all the effort. I think that this particular amendment, as Councilmember Reamer just stated, reflects the collaborative nature of this process. This is groundbreaking. I mean, it's one of the original, of the lead co-sponsors, of this particular bill. I think that this moves us in a very important and positive direction, and it adds to the other efforts that we have undertaken in a very short period of time. And so I think it strikes a very important balance. And as Councilmember Rice had alluded to, we have these seems like unending conversations about a lot of those public safety challenges that we continue to see in the up county and the mid county parts of the county, east part of the county. So there are things that we have to balance here, but I think that this is a great step forward, and I'll be supporting the amendment.
Thank you. I see no other speakers. Is that correct? I've seen no other speakers a couple times, and that was not correct. Okay. I've seen no other speakers. It has been moved by Councilmember Alvernoz, seconded by Councilmember Rice for this amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. And that is Councilmember Alvernoz, Councilmember Katz, Councilmember Hucker, Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Reamer, Councilmember Friedson, Councilmember Glass, Councilmember Navarro. Those opposed, please raise your hand. Councilmember Jawando. The amendment passes 8-1. So now, Ms. Wellens, unless I am incorrect, is there anything else before we actually vote on the actual bill?
No, Mr. President.
All right. Now, do we need? Okay, Councilmember Jawanda would like to speak to the bill, but do we need an actual motion? The Public Safety Committee recommended enactments with amendments. The fact that we amended the amendments, do we need an actual motion, or can we just pass? Can we vote on this without that? I want to make certain that we're going through it the right way. So, and somebody can double check that as Councilmember Jawanda speaks to the bill.
You can just vote on the bill.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. I do this every time, you, Mr. Gomer. Yes, it's a voice from heaven. I don't know. Councilmember Jawando, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I was going to say, just for good measure, I would be happy to move the amended, but we don't need to do that. So it sounds like so. Obviously, as I explained, many of the things contained in the police department's proposal, I was fine with and agreed with. I just didn't, on principle, think that. I think there's too many. It's too broad, and I appreciate Councilmember Rice saying we could come back to it. But overall, I agree with Councilmember Navarro statement she just made, and I want to thank Councilmember Navarro, Rice, and Alvernoz, and all my colleagues, Councilmembers Katz, Friedson, Hucker, and Reamer, for their work. I think it was significant that as council members of color, we led this bill, which is a transformational bill. It will put us in a category of very few jurisdictions in the country that have raised the standard of when deadly force can be used, require de-escalation, and deadly force to only be used as a last resort, as well as the many other things we do as far as prohibit striking individuals and dramatically limiting. And I don't want to undersell that. You know, I'm a lawyer. I argue for a living. But the dramatically limiting the use of no-knock warrants, the primary vehicle in drug cases being used for that. And that's a big step as well. So I think this is going to keep residents safe. I think it is the right thing to do. Hopefully you can, I don't know, I'm getting a Skype call here, but hopefully you can hear it. It's the right thing to do, and it's going to make sure that affected communities, our African American, Latino community, disabled residents, a whole range are a part of the development of this policy. I think that's another amendment we added, which is really, really important, goes along with what we've done with the Police Advisory Commission and their input. And so I just really want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank Christine Wellens and the attorneys on our staff. I want to thank the police department and for getting information to us. And this is going to have a dramatic impact. One of the things, the reasons I was so passionate about this change is because it's directly responsive to what we saw in the protests we saw, the level of force that was used, the inhumanity against George Floyd, and some of the cases we've seen, unfortunately, here. It's a direct response. Is it a panacea? No, but it is a direct response in some of the most urgent, life-threatening situations. And in other jurisdictions, the few that have passed this type of use of force change, you did see dramatically less police-involved deaths. So I think this will keep our residents safe, and I thank the Public Safety Committee and Mr. President for your work on it as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, brother. Councilmember Jawando, you have done a great job. I remember when we texted each other back at the end of May after the George Floyd incident and said, we got to do something. And then we had a conversation with Councilmember Navarro and Councilmember Albernos, and we said we need to, as the folks of color on this council, do something. And it isn't often, we do a lot of stuff, right? We do a lot of stuff. But it isn't often that we do stuff that makes such a difference that we know is going to change the lives of people in our community. We should be so proud, man. And I'm telling you, the realism is that we have our other council members who could be more passionate about this issue as well, and standing up and saying this is something that needs to be done. And we know that this is the right thing for our community. It's the reason why we all raised our hands in support of our chief, Marcus Jones, right? And said, this is the person who's going to be leading us, who's going to get and understand what we want to do in redefining policing in our community before George Floyd even happened. It's the reason why your Let Act and all the things. Look, we said what we wanted to accomplish a long time ago. And this is just all coming into fruition right now. So I feel full. I'm just going to tell you, I feel some type of way, and it's happy. I'm good because I know what this means. Because again, when that young lady gets shot in the head and 2 other people get shot in my community, right? As much as we need to protect folks from being victimized by police, I also have to protect the victims in my community as well. I've got to do both, right? And when I talk to that family and talk to them about what's happening in their community and how we need to get a handle on it, and I try and explain to a mother why her child is potentially going to be lost, who'll never live the same way again, there are circumstances where we've got to do what we need to do to support our police also. I just hope that folks that are watching this and who are anti-police understand that there's also that side, that responsibility that I have, also as a person of color, because they were people of color. Let's not forget about them too. Let's not forget about those victims of crimes that are out there that are asking for justice, asking for protection, right? So we owe that to them also. All I'm saying is that we got to have a balance. And I think we've done that. I really want to thank you, Councilmember Jawando, Councilmember Navarro, Councilmember Albernos, Councilmember Friedson, Councilmember Glass, Councilmember Reamer, Councilmember Hucker, and Council President Katz. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have made my day.
Thank you. Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well said, Councilmember Rice. I want to thank you and Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Jawando, and Albernos and Navarro, especially for this bill. It's very timely, and a lot of hard work has gone into it. I'm very appreciative that we're all stepping forward after all your hard work to make this happen. We've all heard from so many residents and stakeholders on what the council can do to respond to this moment in American history, and I'm grateful to all the community advocates as well, and I want them to know and see that we heard them and we're taking action, not just on this, but on seeing racism as a public health crisis, taking action to expand our mobile crisis units, and many other steps. This is one big step in the right direction, and I want people to feel like that they've been heard, because these policies have been in place for a while. There were those who said, well, we just updated not that long ago, there's not really a need for this bill. I want community members who advocated for this to really, there's 4,000 people that have written into us all, at least, I think. I want them to feel like that we're listening, and not just listening, but taking action. Use of force has to be proportional. That's core to this set of reforms. It's clear that many ultimately lethal encounters in Montgomery County were escalated, often, I think, unintentionally by the first actions of the first responding officer. And so it's important that we're doing this today, but it can't stop here. It really has to continue to update our training. Training's not a panacea either, but if this just is a policy that doesn't make its way into our training, we've seen our officers do what they're trained to do. And so this is the first step. The training has to follow, and then the enforcement of this law has to follow as well. Very happy about the limits on no-knock warrants. That is a big step in the right direction. Two things that I don't think we covered, just because we covered them in the committee, but I don't think it's been mentioned here. Just quickly, I'm happy the committee passed unanimously an amendment. I think I urged at introduction to eliminate the loophole on the chokeholds. We don't train chokeholds, and none of our police officers should be using chokeholds. But that phrase, unless an officer believes that it's necessary, it's impossible to enforce what an officer believes. And that exists in New York law, where they have a ban on chokeholds as well. And obviously that language didn't help save Eric Garner. So I'm glad that that's out. We have an absolute ban on chokeholds. I want advocates to know that. And I'm really glad that we were able to take the multiple use of tasers out as well, because the last thing I want is we have a developed taser policy. We can go back and update that as well. But the last thing I want is an officer feeling like if someone didn't stop after one use of a taser, they have to pull out their gun. We should always be pushing our officers to use the least lethal type of force available. Anyway, those are a few points that I thought were left out, but I really want to express my gratitude to everybody as well. This is an important moment, and I'm glad we're all taking a step forward. Thanks again to all the lead sponsors.
Thank you, Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you, Mr. President. In particular, I want to thank you, Mr. Council President, as both Chair of the Public Safety Commission and President, doing double duty here, and really express my deep appreciation and respect for my dear friends, Council Members Navarro, Rice, and Giwando, for your collaboration on this. This has been an important discussion, and all of my colleagues have unanimously supported this from the beginning, and so appreciate all of their support as well. As the rest of the country debates and discusses how to reimagine public safety, we're taking action here in Montgomery County. And yes, there are more steps that we need to take, but this, coupled with the introduction of support for licensed social workers to enhance our crisis response teams, this coupled with the landmark legislation to define community policing and establishing benchmarks that we can track ourselves moving forward against, that Councilmembers Navarro and Rice introduced, this coupled with all of our work within racial equity, all unites in the right direction. And I know there's tremendous urgency and a feeling from some that we may not even be moving fast enough. But I just want to acknowledge and take a step back and look at what we've been able to accomplish, both with this bill, but also the other bills that preceded it, and what's coming as well, that balances the need to ensure we have public safety for all, acknowledges the incredibly difficult work that it is to be in law enforcement and how hard of a job it is. But for all of us to put our law enforcement officials and first responders in the best possible position to respond to this moment of time and continue to establish the trust that is so vital to ensuring public safety for all. So I do think, and also I want to express my appreciation to Chief Jones and his team for actively participating and collaborating in this discussion. And I know that there were some disagreements among other key stakeholders, but I think overall this is something that will be significant, move the needle, and move us forward as a community. So thank you, Mr. President, and I yield back to you.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. This morning when we had our session to discuss COVID-19 updates with Dr. Gales and Dr. Stoddard, I took a step back to think a little bit about the macro picture here. And I feel the same way about this particular piece of legislation. We have been so overwhelmed in working around the clock to address the issues regarding this pandemic and mitigate the impact that I feel like sometimes we don't take a step back to reflect. The fact is that this council in some ways was foreshadowing a lot. I mean, last year when we passed the racial equity and social justice law, we have to remember that it took King County 10 years to do that. We did it in a year. And then all of these different bills regarding the Lead Act or the community policing, as it was stated, all the work around really pushing the envelope to make sure that we are looking at things and addressing things from a structural way, looking at items and initiatives that provide the best possible results and that can also be scaled up. All of that, these were things that we were doing last year without even knowing or imagining that 2020 would bring these twin pandemics. And so I just, want to say that there are times when you find yourself in a specific place for a reason, in a particular time for a reason. And I have said this before, I so much appreciate each and every one of you because we're all here in this moment trying to meet this moment as best we can. But somehow it was as if we knew that we had to. And so, yes, this is another step forward. I think that when we were all experiencing the gut-wrenching feeling right after George Floyd's murder, and continue to then have to reflect on everything else that we need to do regarding institutionalized racism and, dismantling all of these structures, et cetera, in light of leadership at the national level that just seems to every day put forth another barrier and another barrier and another barrier, it can feel pretty overwhelming and pretty exhausting. But I am energized every single day because I know that each and every one of you, literally every day, comes up with another extraordinary thing that we can do to change policies, to invest, to address, to mitigate. And I really appreciate that so much because I can't imagine what it must be to be in elected office in some of these jurisdictions where it's as if people are in some twilight zone that don't even want to acknowledge that we even have something called COVID-19 going on, and who think that racism is not something that we should be addressing. So I very much feel very, very humble and so honored to be serving this county in this particular time and serving with all of you as well. And I so much appreciate, the leadership of the police department and all our departments, agencies, because everybody is just trying to do that every day to figure out how we can come out of all of this a much better place. So yeah, this is pretty groundbreaking. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to work with each of you to get all of these things done and everything else that we're going to continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just, I got through it without getting emotional. Craig almost brought me to the line, but and then Nancy with the same. I want to say thank you to all the organizations again that advocated. To Councilmember Hucker's point, I mean, you guys have been on the council longer than me, but I've never seen this amount of email come in on an issue, and it's such a multifaceted issue. And as we've talked about, connected to hundreds of years of institutional racism, but as I've often said, there's no more pronounced way when there's state-sanctioned, violence and discrimination. People feel it, and that's why we've awoken right now. And I really think in our society and the history of the world, it's going to be pre-George Floyd and post-George Floyd. The things that are coming out in so many arenas of policy, and this is one part of it. I think we've seen an awakening, and so I wanted to say thank you again and have that context. As someone who's worked on these types of issues my whole life and got into public policy to try to address these, and my experience growing up here, we've got so much to do. It is really heartening to have colleagues that want to do it. And I know that there's many places, I think to Councilmember Navarro's point, where that's not the case. And we have that here. So we might not always agree on every tactic and strategy, but I'm really blessed and thankful to work with each and every one of you. I really appreciate you, Council President, in particular. You said something to me, and I hope you don't mind me sharing it. When we had a conversation in the midst of this bill, you were like, Will, every time we talk, I learn something. and I feel the same way about you in just our varied experiences and how that just brings together, I think, a right mix for public policy. And so thank you to each of you, and thank you to the public.
Well, and let me just say, and there's no other speakers, so let me just say before we have the roll call vote on this, that it truly has been an unbelievable ride on this one. We did not start out exactly on the same plane, to my friend Councilmember Giundo, but because we respected each other's opinions and that of the thousands of emails that came in on a variety of topics, but because we respected each other's opinions, we ended up, I believe, in not a perfect place, but a far better place because of that. And that's what legislation should be about. We shouldn't just stick to the opinion that you come into the discussion about. You're a representative of the public. You represent a million different opinions. And in Montgomery County, we probably have 2 million opinions because people will give you a couple opinions on every topic. And so that's what we did. We tried our best to come up with something that is going to be what I believe workable. And to Councilmember Rice and other people's point, if this doesn't work, and this might not be perfect, I mean, so we'll have to figure out what's a better way to do it. But at least we have started in the right step, and that's as good as it gets. So with that, before anybody changes their mind, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Giundo?
Yes.
Mr. Giundo votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Absolutely.
That was a yes. He did say yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Katz?
Yes, and that carries unanimously 9-0. Thank you very much for expedited bill 2720. It is unanimous. All right, so moving right along, the next item that we have is an introduction and an action, and we need to vote on the suspension of Rule Procedure 7C, which is required in order to introduce and act upon this resolution in the same day. We have not heard from Ms. Wellens enough today, so we're going to turn to her so that she can explain it, please.
Thank you, Mr. President and Council members. So this item, as you know, there are two ways that a charter amendment can qualify to get on the general election ballot. One is if the council passes a resolution to place it on the general election ballot, or alternatively, citizens can petition to have a ballot question placed on the ballot, and that's the situation that we have before you in this item. The resolution before you that's up for both introduction and action today would place on the 2020 ballot a question related to Charter Provision 305, and this petition would provide that, you know, under the current 305, among many other provisions, there is a revenue limit, kind of known as colloquially as the charter limit, and it can only be overridden by a unanimous vote of all current council members. So this proposed petitioned question would ask the voters to decide whether the charter limit should have no opportunity for override whatsoever. The local board of elections determined that this question has a sufficient number of signatures to appear on the ballot, and essentially what this resolution is, it's required under state law for the council to essentially acknowledge that the requirements have been met and that this question will appear on the ballot. And then again, yes, as the council president mentioned, there would just need to have a suspension of the rules in order to both introduce and act on this resolution at the same day.
Thank you. So I guess first we need to have a suspension of the rules. We need a motion on that.
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Rice, seconded by Councilmember Hucker. Although there's no discussion, I believe, on that. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, we have suspended our rules. And then the next item that we have, Ms. Wellens, make certain I'm doing this correctly, please. The next item that we have is to actually, I need a motion for the resolution. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a motion for the resolution? Somebody needs to move it.
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Giwando, seconded by Councilmember Reamer. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously as well. Okay. The next item that we have is, and Ms. Wellens, we're complete on item 3, right? We don't have to do anything else on item 3?
Correct.
Okay. The next item that we have is item 4, and we did have item 5 as well, which, as was noted by the clerk earlier on, that has now been deleted. But I did receive a letter from County Executive Mark Elrich in the form of an email, and it says, later today, and it's addressed to me and to Vice President Hucker, it says, later today, the County Council will take action on a significant measure to stabilize our county's fiscal future, and I applaud the county's leadership in developing a proposal that I expect will receive unanimous support. During the past several weeks, we engaged in many discussions about how we might move a proposal forward to the voters, and I'm pleased that we have reached a consensus on such a proposal as embodied by the recommendation from the Governmental Operations Committee. Therefore, I would encourage the Council to focus its discussion and action on that proposal and request you withdraw my initial proposal from further consideration. And that was number 5 on our agenda today, and that has now been withdrawn. Over the past year, I have been making the case for changing our charter, and I am grateful that this Council has been willing to join me in this important endeavor. As you know, our charter manufactures austerity to create a system that is broke on purpose. It leaves our residents and our business community with the false perception that we cannot manage our resources. And while our neighbors in the region focus on what future they want to build for their communities, our charter prevents us from tackling a range of issues, from the opportunity gap in our schools to quality infrastructure, affordable housing, and adequately funded reserves. We need this amendment to move forward even during these unprecedented times. Our voters will also be presented with another charter proposal, this one from Robin Ficker. The Ficker Amendment has the serious potential to destroy our county's outstanding credit rating and to hinder our continued response to the coronavirus emergency. It will cause a financial calamity for our community that will take decades to reverse. I'm glad we also stand united in our determination to oppose the Ficker Amendment. Once again, I applaud your willingness to respond to the concerns of our residents, and I'm glad we will be unified in the effort to gain the support of the voters. And let me just publicly say that I want to thank the county executive for his hard work on this as well. I know that he and I have had, and I know he and many of my other colleagues, perhaps every one of my other colleagues, have had many good conversations on this, and I believe that this is the correct path forward. I believe he is showing leadership on this issue, and I want to publicly thank him for that. And with that, I'm going to turn to Councilmember
Navarro. Item 4.
On
item 4?
Yes. And with that, I'm going to turn to Councilmember Navarro. And I had the paper in front of me, Councilmember Navarro. Just couldn't find it. Thank you.
That's quite all right. So Item 4 is a resolution, proposed amendment to the county charter property tax limit tax rate increases. So basically, this resolution was introduced on July 14th, 2020 by lead sponsors, council members Friedson, Council President Katz, and myself. In other words, it's the GO committee, and with co-sponsors, council members Albornoz, Rice, and Reamer. The GO committee proposes this ballot question, and it was approved by the committee on July 20th with a 3-0, with a couple of clarifying amendments. Under the proposed charter amendment, property taxes would increase based on growth in property tax assessments. Tax revenue would no longer be tied to inflation. Council President just read a message memo that we received from County Executive, where he has withdrawn his original proposed amendment and endorsed the GO recommendation. I too want to thank County Executive and his team for working collaboratively to arrive at this point in time. I think it's so important to highlight how critical it is in this particular moment that we address this fiscal policy head on. It's going to have extraordinary implications as we are facing these unprecedented fiscal challenges. And as it was stated, this particular proposal that the GO committee is putting forward really also, I think, speaks truth to power to that economic development platform that we adopted last year and all the work that we have engaged in regarding economic development. That, of course, with the pandemic, now we have to redouble our efforts. I think this aligns the moment that we're living in. You know, these are the times that we have to face, and this particular proposal, in my opinion, is a type of proposal that then aligns our needs with reality. I want to turn first to Councilmember Friedson, because he has worked, I think if we work 24/7, I think he works, I don't know, 48/14 or something like that on so many issues. And this one in particular, I know that he has been instrumental in getting the basics of this proposal and bringing us to this particular moment, and to the point that then GO committee was able to not only introduce this but also pass it with those amendments. And then after Councilmember Friedson describes why we're here and why this is important, then perhaps Ms. Wellens can go through the specifics, and then we could take a vote. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you so much for that. I'm really proud of how the entire county leadership has come together on this. We've had a tremendous amount of conversation publicly, privately, individually, and collectively on how to move forward and how to fix what we agree is a challenge with a tax policy and a fiscal environment that does not allow us to invest in our priorities, does not allow us to maintain our AAA bond rating and to do the right and thoughtful decisions, does not allow us to incentivize economic development and economic growth, which we spend so much time here talking about, and really misaligns what we all try to do. You know, there was 80-90% agreement on the issues, and a lot of discussion on the remaining 10 or 15%, which is how it's supposed to work. I think we got to a good outcome, and I'm really proud of the consensus that we've now reached, and look forward to moving the ball forward. I significantly want to thank Rich Madalino, who's joined us, who he and I have spent, if I spend 14 days a week and 48 hours a day, Rich is there on those extra hours with me, and he and I have been in regular communication talking about these issues, what the implications are, and the county executive and he have been collaborative, which I very much appreciate. And you know, it really does reflect the fact that we all have different interests, and there are different ideologies and philosophies, and we are universally in agreement that we currently have a bad policy that is being proposed to be doubled down upon, which would be a disastrous policy, and we have the opportunity to replace it with a simple, straightforward, and much better policy. And that is a watershed moment for this county. This would be the fiscal responsible thing to do. It would also be the best thing to do for our residents and for our businesses, and also allow us to grow our priorities and our revenues with our economy, with our businesses, so that we bet on ourselves. We have a system right now where we're betting against Montgomery County, and to make that permanent and completely inflexible is what's before us, and we have a chance to change it. Basically, and we've talked about this before, and we'll talk about this a lot more later, and we're going to have to make the case to the voters to explain this. But we have a system right now that disincentivizes economic development and economic growth, that caps us in what we think Montgomery County can be and limits our ability to invest then in ourselves. So it doesn't allow us to grow our economy, and it doesn't allow us to invest back into our community in order to continue that growth. And that is not a strategy in any way for success. We would replace a complicated, convoluted, concocted, arbitrary revenue cap, which nobody understands, and replace it with a very simple tax rate. Whatever your tax rate is this year, your tax rate will be next year, unless 9 members of the county council vote to change it. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's easily understood by every resident and every business, and it will allow us to grow our tax base so we don't necessarily have to grow our tax rates. Currently, we have a system where that's not how it works, which makes no sense, and it creates a misunderstanding from voters about what we are doing with their taxpayer money, which is hard-earned and which we should be investing wisely, efficiently, and effectively. But currently, they are under the misimpression that is not the case. So really proud of the moment that we're in, really appreciate the consensus that we have. I really look forward to making the case to voters of why a consistent and transparent tax policy that replaces a bet against Montgomery County for a bet for Montgomery County, that allows us to invest in economic development and economic growth, to provide our priorities like traffic congestion and school overcrowding, and allows us to make sure that we can reinvest to continue that economic growth. I can't wait to make that case for fiscal responsibility instead of fiscal insanity, and look forward to joining each of you to make that case to the voters. But the first step is here, getting it onto the ballot, and that's what we're doing today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson, and let me very publicly say that you did a great job on this one. We know that you, and to Councilmember Navarro's point, we know that you are a tireless worker on many, many topics, but this one you even outshined every other topic. So thank you very much, and for lending your expertise on this. Councilmember Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilmember Friedson and the entire GO committee and the co-sponsors for putting this forward, and all your work on this. I know it took a lot of time, and certainly Director Madaleno as well. And thanks to all the residents and the community organizations that have been working for years, really, to address the issues embedded in our charter. I'm glad we're putting forward an alternative to the FICR amendment. I'm glad we're coming together around that, and we didn't talk about the FICR amendment that we just passed over, so I want to add a few words about that. It's clear, if passed, I think voters aren't focused on this enough. The FICR's new amendment would devastate our county government. It would threaten our AAA bond rating, which would cost taxpayers significantly more money for our capital projects and other borrowing. It would threaten our ability to grow our reserves, meaning less resources for our residents and business owners, particularly when there's a crisis like the COVID crisis that we're all going through right now. I'll just share, I was asked multiple times to sign the petition to qualify FICR's latest amendment. And I'll tell you, the volunteers who asked me to sign it didn't know anything about it. They didn't know it would increase our fire response time, something that we on the Public Safety Committee have had to fight to maintain year after year after year in the last 5 years, even during an economic expansion. Imagine what we're going to be dealing with during an economic recession, and our fire response times inevitably will increase dramatically if the FICR amendment passes. So folks should buy a fire extinguisher or install a sprinkler system, because they shouldn't expect a truck at their house in 6 to 10 minutes like they can right now. The volunteers I spoke to didn't know that we would cut public services. We would have to, that it would almost certainly increase class size. And she certainly didn't know that it would threaten our cherished AAA bond rating and cost taxpayers more money for our borrowing. And she didn't know it would likely lower property values in Montgomery County, but all those are inevitable consequences of the Ficker Amendment. The volunteers I spoke to just told me they wanted lower taxes, and they didn't trust the council to do the right thing with their taxes, but they had very little idea of what taxes actually pay for. They admitted to me they like their parks, they like their libraries, they want police and fire service, and they thought that those would magically continue to appear even under the Ficker Amendment. Councilmember Rice and I used to serve with Speaker Bush, who always said everyone wants to go to heaven and nobody wants to die. The folks gathering signatures agreed they want all those things, but they thought they would not be changed at all. So I want the public to know the services that they count on and ask for more of each year, in most cases, will be damaged through this and will shrink. Not all at once, but in small cuts year after year. And the Montgomery County we've all grown to know and love will change irreparably. Property values will decline, our human services will shrink, and I think worse, the lives of our most vulnerable people who pay their taxes and rely on our public services, and right now we're threatened by COVID in many cases, will be lost entirely avoidably in the service of a really misguided right-wing agenda. So I know we're going to discuss it some more. I hope the public, will vote against this, but I really want people to know what's at stake. Because, and I'm very glad we could come together around an alternative, because there's an awful lot at stake with this amendment, and I'm certainly committed to fight against it this fall. I hope all of you will be able to come together around that as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say to Councilmember Friedson, the next stop is the Israel-Palestine peace agreement.
Well, that'll be a little easier. I mean,
yeah. You really did a fantastic job here, and I do want to express my deep appreciation to the executive branch, and in particular you, Mr. Madaleno. I know there have been numerous conversations about this issue, and I also want to thank the advocates and the coalition that formed, that is made up of incredibly important progressive organizations, and I want this message to go directly to them. We are aligned. We are going to move forward to appropriately address our tax structure here in Montgomery County in a way that is progressive, in a way that bets on ourselves, and in a way that ensures that, to Councilmember Vice President Hucker's point, the Ficker Amendment does not move forward, because it would be catastrophic to our ability to be able to meet the needs of our constituents and continue to set the high bar that we have here for county government in Montgomery County. Many other jurisdictions would love to have the problems that we have, and it's because of the incredible governance that we've had of previous councils and this one, and previous county executives, that we are in the position that we are in. And so I do also very much look forward to making the case to our voters that this is critically important to support, and that this will significantly enhance the county's ability to grow in a responsible manner that will continue to set the bar very high for many years to come. So thank you again to everyone that worked on this, especially Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Councilmember Rayner.
Thank you, Council President. Also want to thank Councilmember Friedson for the heroic effort he's put in here and bringing the council together and the executive branch as well. Director Madaleno, thank you. Appreciate your hard work here and your role. And to be moving forward with the united front is invaluable. I think it would have been very difficult for us to proceed if we didn't have general agreement, and voters would have known. And I loathe the Ficker Amendment as much as anyone does. It's anti-democratic. It really cuts to the heart of elective government. I also I'm willing to accept that Rome wasn't built in a day, so we're going to be asking the voters for faith and trust when they're entering the polls or filling out, hopefully, their mail-in ballot. They're going to have a choice. I sincerely believe that people will choose the alternative that the county government's putting forward and reject the vision of austerity and restriction that Robin Ficker is putting forward. And if they do vote for what we've offered, I think it'll be a sign of some confidence in local government and in Montgomery County government. And that's, confidence in government is in short supply. That is one of the problems that we're dealing with. When you ask people very abstract questions like, would you like to have low taxes? Do you have confidence in government? People generally give very predictable answers these days. So we're seeking something that's a little bit more elevated here. But Montgomery County is the kind of community that often delivers on higher expectations. So I think we've got a really good shot. And I think it's wise to take a kind of a targeted path here, not to shoot for the moon and then land on our face, but rather to take a step that we feel is, has a really strong possibility of winning. So that's why I support this, and I think it's the right thing to do. And if who knows, if we can win this argument, maybe we move on to the next one in a couple more years, and we could talk about another improvement to the charter. So thank you for to everyone who worked so hard on this. Appreciate it very much, and I look forward to fighting against the devastating proposal from Robin Ficker and working to support this one. Thanks.
Thank you. I too wanted to publicly thank Rich Manalino. I failed to do that when I first read the letter, and he was someone that worked on that letter. We know that. So I want to publicly thank him for all of his hard work. He knew what we needed to do, and he kept his eye on the prize, and he got it done. So I thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention, and Councilmember Rice is going to speak right after I am, but I did want to say that I'm a Penn and Teller fan. I'm somebody that loves magic. I know that it can't be real, but I enjoy watching it. I enjoy the whole entertainment side of it. And I've always been intrigued that there are people that sincerely believe that government is done by magic, that you don't need any resources, and that magically, God forbid you have a heart attack or your neighbor has a heart attack, magically an ambulance is going to appear, and people who are very, very professional and very qualified are going to show up and save people. And it just happened. Well, it doesn't happen that way. You need resources, and in order to have resources, you have to have money. And in order to have money, you have to have people that are paying toward it. It is not something that we take lightly. I once had someone that told me that they didn't want a governmental service, and they said, "Look, I've never called the fire department." That's what they told me. I've never called the fire department. And I asked them, I said, "Should we do away with it based on that? I mean, what are you telling me?" We need to have government services. If you want to have a good life, you need government services. And there's government services that people take for granted that they never consider to be government services. If you have an automobile and want to get from place to place, whether it be by mass transit, those are government services. If you want a street light, that is a government service, and paying for the electricity that goes in that to keep that street light on. So we need funds. We need proper funds. We need to tax properly. We need to make certain that what we do is that we are using our dollars in the best fashion possible. But that is what it is. That is what government's job is, and that is our job to make certain that the funds and that the resources are there so that people can have the better life that they need. Councilmember Rice, please.
Well, thank you very much. Let me start off by thanking my friend, Councilmember Friedson, for the great job that he's done. I remember when he first reached out and talked about what it is that we needed to do to try and defeat this. I will say this. Councilmember Navarro and I are the only ones who've had the distinct pleasure of running against Mr. Ficker. We know his stance. I know him personally, and I won't disparage him publicly, but I will just say I've had some very interesting conversations with him, as has my family, and I'll just leave it there. And it's indicative, I think, of what it is that we see that's at the heart of this proposal. And I hope that people take this to light. I'm going to build off of what Councilmember Hucker said. The reality is that a lot of people who are of affluence won't see direct results from this right away. The people who are going to suffer the most are the people who are of lower income, lower socioeconomic status, and primarily people of color. Let's just be real about it. When you're talking about cutting services, just to your example, Mr. Katz, there are plenty of people who said, I've never ever seen a fire truck in my neighborhood. What do I need to worry about fire service for, whether it's 6 minutes or 10 minutes? Who cares, right? Ask the people at White Oak about whether or not the response of the fire department made a difference in their lives. Let me just share with you that regardless of how much money you have in your pocket, you never know until you need it. And I will tell you that when my wife and I called the fire department to come and take care of our daughter who had stopped breathing when she was an infant, you better believe every single minute mattered. And those are the things that I don't think that people think about often. They don't think about the fact that these government services that we provide are incredibly needed for them. But I'll share something else with you. Even for my more fiscal conservatives, who will always talk about crime in communities and about us spending too much on welfare and those kinds of things. Well, guess what? If you want us to invest in programs that are going to ensure that people aren't relying upon those systems, that's going to require us to continue to invest in education, right? To double down on investment when it comes to things like the Kerwin Commission. We can't do that. We can't meet our responsibility for the Kerwin Commission and revamping education if we pass this resolution that Mr. Ficker has proposed. I mean, let's just be honest about what it is. What it is a way for folks to say, I'm keeping all of my toys and I'm leaving the sandbox. And whatever you guys have left, it's up to you. I don't think that's who we are as Montgomery County. Being born and raised here, I can tell you that I believe in a community that knows that we believe in helping one another, but we also believe in making sure that it's a community that has a way of ensuring that everybody has a fair go. Folks don't get a fair go if we go with the Ficker Amendment. Let me tell you. Let me just be very clear with folks so that they understand. It's going to mean that those folks who really just need a little bit of a helping hand to get them started and on track aren't going to have that. And guess who's going to suffer? It's not just them, but it's all of us. Because if you care about crime and the cost that that has on government, if you care about incarceration and the cost that that has on government, if you care about welfare programs and the cost that it has on government, if you care about people using the hospitals as their primary care physicians and the cost that that has on government, all of those things will get worse. They will. There's no question they'll get worse. So Montgomery County has a choice to continue down the pathway of going towards self-sustainability for all, lifting people up, fairness and equality and equity, or to choose to take their toys and go home. I hope that folks make the right choice. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. You just talked about your affinity for magic. So I learned something about you. But, if Robin Ficker's proposal moves forward, we know it's nothing but hocus pocus. Because, quite frankly, poof, overnight, our quality of life here in Montgomery County will change. And as was just stated, our ability to help our neighbors and to do some of the core functions of government, which is on display now more than ever. Providing health care for those in need, providing food for those who are hungry, working overtime to make sure that all of our children are educated with these ever-changing dynamics. That's what local government does. And all of that will be hampered if we don't have the ability to do what's right. And that's what democracy is about. And if you look at it another way, these are anti-democratic little d measures that are being pushed forward. I too want to thank Councilmember Friedson, members of the GO committee, for all of your work. These are very technical issues, trying to figure out how government can operate, and there is no more central way to operate than making sure that our tax policies are fair and equitable. And so, yes, there are years and decades of anti-democratic little d measures that have been put forward that we should start looking at and trying to make sure that as we move into the future, we're able to make sure that everybody is welcome here and everybody can continue living here. And so, again, thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to the executive team and Director Madaleno as well. Your knowledge of the budget and the workings of it was it was helpful for me to talk through some of these things, and so I appreciate the united front that we are now putting forward to recognize that we got to move forward and we got to make positive change in the community, and there's only one way to do that. We need to stop these anti-democratic measures, and we need to have more fair and equitable policies, and I do believe this is a step in that direction. So again, Councilmember Friedson, my friend, thank you for putting hard work and time into this, and I yield back, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. I'll be very quick, Mr. Friedson. Proud to be one of the second youngest member on the council with you. Thank you for your thank you for your work. I'm sorry, Mr. President. Councilmember Navarro mentioned how much time you have in your hands. I'm glad that you're on the council because you can focus on things and spend as much time as you spent on this issue. And it really, I worked in the federal government for a number of years, and one of the things that I miss is deficit spending. That we can, in the federal government, if you see a need, and we hope that they pass the HEROES Act or some version that provides support to us, but you can spend and go into the red and go into the deficit. On local, state, and local government, you can't do that. What we have to raise taxes to provide for the general welfare of our residents. And one of the things I've seen and experienced personally is that when we don't have revenue, and you see this across the country, people suffer dramatically, and people are left out in the cold. And this amendment by Mr. Fickers is the latest in a series to starve people from the county that they love, that they've become accustomed to. I think we've mentioned the most vulnerable, but this is not just going to affect the most vulnerable. If you like your parks, if you like your libraries, I'm lead for libraries, if you like the great quality of life in Montgomery County, which we know isn't available to everybody, that's why many of us ran, that's why I ran, to expand that to more people. But if you like those things, this is going to hurt you. And we're a great county because of the quality of life that we have, the diversity we have, and the great amenities and public services that we have. And there's hardworking folks doing that. And so I'm really proud to support this. I'm glad we came together, and now we can focus on the real problem, which is eliminating and voting against that amendment and allowing more flexibility with the one we're putting forward. So thank you, Mr. Friedson. Thank you to my colleagues, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really appreciate all the comments that my colleagues have made. I think it is so clear that, the Ficker amendment, what it does is that it attempts to rob our quality of life. The Montgomery County that we all love, the Montgomery County that we aspire to be, everything that brought all of us here, that is what this amendment will his proposal, the Ficker proposal, that's what it's going to do. It's going to erode the quality of life of Montgomery County. This particular proposal, the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee proposal, what it does is that it actually, in my opinion, supports what I've always loved about serving in public office. For me, I've always been guided by this principle that we have to do everything in our power to create great jobs, to create economic opportunities, to really pursue an aggressive economic development strategy. And that way we can have the resources necessary to be able to invest in all of our residents. That's what our proposal does. It really does make a change in terms of this crazy property tax cap, but it incentivizes all of us to work really hard in creating jobs, in stimulating the economy, in doing all of that. And so to me, that's why this is so important, and this is why we have to beat the FICRA amendment. So before we go into the description of it really quickly, I think Mr. Medellino wanted to make some comments. He's been also working triple time in all of this. And then after him, I think if we can turn to Ms. Wellens just to walk through the language real quick, and then we could take a vote, Mr. President. Mr. Medellino. Oh, Mr. Medellino has gone into some really, really cool background there.
I'm joining you from the fiscal death spiral that our community will face.
Oh, terrible. That's terrible. Yeah.
Because it is that bad. We have, well, there are a few, benefits of using Zoom. So, the county executive wanted me to thank all of you for your willingness to sit down and listen and work together towards a great consensus approach. Certainly, the GO committee members were incredibly helpful in getting us to this point. From the very first time I had a conversation with Councilmember Friedson in his office in March, he has been open-minded and willing to work towards coming up with a solution that both he, County Executive Elrich, and all of you could agree to. Certainly Council President Katz and Council President Hucker in helping to lead the council through this conversation. Your efforts are greatly appreciated. I would point out that the FICRA amendment was petitioned to the ballot using a archaic part of our state constitution that was actually enacted when the state only allowed white men to vote, that establishes a threshold that is so low that roughly 1% of the residents of Montgomery County could petition this provision, this amendment to the ballot. And I think it's not hyperbole to say, as Grover Norquist once noted, that the agenda of those who were trying to fight against government was to shrink it to the size that it was small enough that they could drown it in a bathtub. And I think that is what potentially could happen with this amendment. It would devastate our longstanding, well-regarded fiscal policies, jeopardize our AAA bond rating, where we are, as the chair of the GO committee can tell you, we're the longest standing community that has a AAA bond rating in this country as far as a county. It will hamper, as Councilmember Glass said, our ability to respond to the coronavirus. So it is imperative that we educate the voters about why the FICRA amendment would be bad for the county, for the future, for our families, for our children. And then I'm so appreciative of the fact that we've put something good on the ballot that will actually provide the voters with an opportunity to provide some stability to our county and to help us be in a position where growth will actually pay for itself and for helping us move forward in strengthening our community. So the county executive greatly appreciates you always having an open door, listening, and for everyone to come up with a great compromise to put before the voters. So thank you again. And now I don't have to call you late at night.
Or on the weekends.
Yeah.
All right, Council President, I think if we could turn to Ms. Wellens and she could just very quickly describe the actual language, and then perhaps we can vote.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Councilmember Navarro and Councilmember Friedson sort of covered the bases and described the resolution before you at the outset of this discussion. So I'll just briefly reiterate what this resolution would do. I mean, it would place on the 2020 ballot a question to the voters of whether to amend Section 305 of the Charter to require an affirmative vote of all current council members in order to raise the tax rate on real property above what it was in the prior year. And to be clear about the rate we're talking about, this rate is referred to under the current charter as the ad valorem tax on real property. The Department of Finance, in its annual budget book, publishes this rate, and this is referred to by the Department of Finance as a weighted tax rate on real property. You can see in the packet sort of the history of what those rates have been in recent years, and the current rate is $0.9785 per $100 of assessed value. So that would be if the voters approve this amendment, that would be where the tax rate would be frozen, absent a unanimous vote of all current council members. In terms of the language, you'll see on pages 4 and 5 of the staff memorandum, you can see the exact language that the GO committee is proposing, and it's clarified from the resolution as it initially introduced. This language is a little more brief and clear. We worked on it. Council staff worked together with the county attorney's office to come up with this language that you see on the pages 4 and 5, which again is what the GO committee has recommended to you. So that is the precise language that you'll be asked to vote on. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I think we have all gotten, we've all spoken on this topic. This is a recommendation from the Government Operations Committee. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. Now, moving right along again, we have a consent calendar as and we have two more items, or consent calendar and one item beyond that. The consent calendar, is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Joando, seconded by Councilmember Rice. I see no conversation on that. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. And the last item that we have is item 7, which is under the district council session, and it's strictly an announcement that the public hearing for the 2020-2024 subdivision staging policy and related bills is scheduled for September the 15th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. And with that, I know this is hard to believe, but we are adjourned. Thank you all very, very much. Bye-bye.